Chapter 99. If it was any other time, this would be considered as blocking the emperor's way. But today, no matter if it was the palace guards or the ministers, no one tried to stop it. It was as if everything was perfectly justified. Hee, it's Minister Yang. Since that's the case, Empress, let's get off the carriage together and see what tricks he's up to. Yingzong, Zhu Qizhen, seemed to be in a good mood. As he laughed, he helped Empress Qian onto the dragon carriage and walked onto the red carpet. Long live the emperor! Just as they stood firmly on the ground, shouts sounded from all around them. A group of commoners who came to watch the show instinctively knelt on the ground the moment they saw the emperor's face. In addition, there were many people that Yang Chendong had arranged to guide the crowd. Instantly, shouts of "Long live the emperor" rang out from all directions. The momentum was so great that it was much louder than the voices of the ministers in the imperial court. At first, Yingzong was shocked. He instinctively thought that there was some kind of danger and wanted to turn around and run. However, when he saw that it was the crowd cheering for him, he laughed and then raised his hand generously to the crowd. "Everyone, please rise. Thank you for your majesty." The crowd of commoners who came to watch the show climbed up from the ground and looked at Zhu Qizhen excitedly. Their expressions were filled with admiration, but more than that, it was envy. Zhu Qizhen seemed to enjoy this kind of gaze. He did not move quickly. It felt as if he was taking care of Empress Qian, but in reality, he was enjoying this moment of being the center of attention. Yang Chendong acted as if he did not know about this. He led the way in front and looked left and right from time to time. He used his insight to see if there was any danger in the surroundings. Even though the area was already filled with spies from the Eastern Faction Guards and the embroidered uniform guards, and the Security Bureau had also sent out quite a few people, it was better to be safe than sorry. If something really happened to Yingzong today, even if he didn't flee, he would still revolt. Fortunately, no accidents happened along the way. Even though the people were curious about what the emperor looked like, under the stern gazes of the Eastern Faction Guards, the embroidered uniform guards, and the warden's office of the 5 cities, no one had the courage to break the order and cause trouble. Yingzong held Empress Qian's hand and walked forward step by step. Along the way, he frequently raised his hand to the people around him to show off his might as the son of heaven. Just like that, when they were halfway through the journey, shouts suddenly sounded from all directions, completely drowning out the noisy discussions around them. In our great Ming dynasty, the mountains are the lofty heads. In our great Ming dynasty, the rivers flow like hot blood. In our great Ming dynasty, the trees are rooted to the ground. In our great Ming dynasty, the clouds hold hands. The vast plains are wrapped with jade belts. The fields are woven with colored silk. The winds of the great Ming rise. The mighty winds of the great Ming shake the heavens and roar. As soon as the majestic voice rang out, everyone was startled at first. Then, General Fan Zhong rushed out from the side to protect the emperor. Even Empress Qian turned pale at this moment. On the other hand, Yingzong, Zhu Qizhen, was surprised at first, but when he understood what everyone was singing, he suddenly burst into laughter. Good! What a mighty and majestic voice! What a good song! Beloved official Yang, is this the new song the people were talking about? Yang Chendong sighed in admiration. As expected of the emperor. His reactions were quick, and his composure was extraordinary. He strode over and said, "Your Majesty, this is the new song this subject composed. It's called Our Great Ming Dynasty." Our Great Ming Dynasty is a good song. Good. You deserve a reward. When Zhu Qizhen heard the 50 male attendants of the immortal abode singing the song together with the crowd, he was extremely happy. He even shouted out a good twice. "Thank you for your reward, Your Majesty." Yang Chendong was also overjoyed. He thanked the emperor on behalf of the 50 attendants. Ha, not bad. A song of praise made Zhu Qizhen very happy. His footsteps seemed to be much lighter as he continued walking. Our great Ming dynasty has many beautiful mountains and rivers. Our great Ming dynasty is rich in natural resources. Our great Ming dynasty's people are the most hard-working. Our great Ming dynasty is even more outstanding now. The 4 seas meet guests, the 5 continents make friends, the winds of the great Ming dynasty rise, the mighty winds of the great Ming dynasty shake the heavens. Along the way, Zhu Qizhen could hear the singing of our great Ming dynasty. He felt as if he was floating in the air. It wasn't just the emperor who felt this way. Even the officials following behind him felt their spirits lifted when they heard this majestic song. Some of the officials who were originally disdainful of the so-called new song began to pay attention to it at this moment. Only now did they realize that if a song was well composed, it might really be able to stir the hearts of people. Our great Ming dynasty was sung over and over again. By the third time it was sung, Yingzong and Empress Qian had already arrived in front of the Immortal Abode's gates. The entire area was covered in red silk, making it look like a sea of red. Your Majesty, this subject will be so bold as to invite the two of you to cut the ribbon. In addition, I would like to invite Lord Hu Mang to come forward as well. Yang Chendong knelt on the ground again and begged loudly. Cut the ribbon? What's the meaning behind that? Yingzong asked curiously. Your Majesty, cutting the ribbon means cutting the ribbon. It's an auspicious omen for the opening of a new store, Yang Chendong replied with a smile. Interesting. Beloved official Yang, please make the arrangements. Yingzong also wanted to see what cutting the ribbon was, so he immediately agreed. Since the emperor had already agreed, the empress naturally nodded with a smile as well. Empress Qian was also a beauty of her generation, and she was also of noble character. Since the two of them had agreed, the Minister of Rites, Hu Mang, naturally couldn't refuse either. Dressed in the robes of a standard second-rank official, he strode over to the ribbon-cutting stage in front of the Immortal Abode. In front of a window on the second floor of the Immortal Abode, a young girl saw Hu Mang walk onto the stage. She immediately shouted excitedly, young miss, look! Lord Hu Mang is also on stage. He's standing right next to His Majesty. That's enough, I saw it. Also, little Qing, can you not be so excited here? If someone hears you, they'll say that the women of the Hu clan have no manners. Hu Yanxiang, who was called Miss, pretended to be angry and glared at her maid Xiaoqing. Then she looked at the ribbon-cutting stage with a sweet face. When she saw that there were only the emperor, the empress, her grandfather, and Yang Chendong on the stage, her face was full of joy. Out of so many ministers, only his grandfather was called to the stage. Was this hinting at something? Hu Yan thought she was smart. She thought this was Yang Chendong's intentional arrangement. He wanted to raise her grandfather's prestige, and at the same time, express his special feelings for the Hu clan. This moved her greatly, but also made her regret it. What made her regret was that she only found out about Yang Chendong's assassination a long time later. Hu Zhongning knew his daughter's temperament, so he gave strict orders that no one was to speak of it. It wasn't until later, when Hu Yan went to visit Yang Duo, that she found out. She was so worried she cried. She even pestered her seventh sister to go to the Yang Chendong manor. Only when she saw that Yang Chendong was still as lively as ever did she finally relax. As someone who had been there before, how could Yang Duo not see Hu Yan's feelings for her seventh brother? She immediately smiled and told her seventh brother to give Hu Yan a gift. Her worries weren't in vain. Yang Chendong thought for a moment, then gave the most prestigious card in the Immortal Abode to Hu Yan. He even invited her to attend the opening ceremony of the Immortal Abode. With this card, Hu Yan had special privileges. Before the Immortal Abode was open to the public, she had the right to enter in advance. As a result, she was the first to witness the prosperity of the Immortal Abode. Today, she even brought her servant little Qing with her to the second floor of the Immortal Abode. She found the best vantage point to watch the opening ceremony. Hu Yan's heart was filled with sweetness. However, what she didn't know was that Yang Chendong hadn't invited Hu Yan to the stage because of her. Instead, it was because Hu Yan was the oldest among the civil officials. He was already 73 years old. Out of respect for the elderly and love for the young, he invited Hu Yan to the stage. In truth, Yang Chendong had also wanted to invite Duke Ying, Zhang Fu, to the stage. He was already 73 years old, but after considering that he didn't get along with Wang Zhan and the others, he didn't want to cause any more trouble. On the stage, Yingzong, Empress Qian, Hu Yan, and Yang Chendong had just taken their places when 4 women in kipaos walked out of the Immortal Abode's main entrance. They were Yang Duo, Chao Yin, Lady Shui, and Lady Xiang. The 4 of them were all extremely beautiful. Coupled with their exquisite Chong Sams, they attracted everyone's attention as soon as they appeared. The 4 women looked like celestial fairies. Each of them carried a copper tray with a pair of scissors on it. These were the props used for the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Wow! They're so beautiful. What are they wearing? How can their figures be so perfect? That's right. If my concubines wore these clothes, wouldn't they be just as beautiful? Faced with this kind of discussion, someone in the crowd quickly responded. These clothes are called kipeos. They're already on sale at the Sky Beyond Trading Company next to the Immortal Abode. Even if you have finished products, you can also customize them. Is that so? Our great Ming dynasty also has something like this for sale? That's great. I'll go take a look at the Sky Beyond Trading Company when I get back. After receiving this response, some of the men in the crowd became even more excited. They were already imagining what their wives would look like if they put on these beautiful kipeos. These kinds of discussions and responses could be seen everywhere in the crowd. The people from the security bureau had all become salesmen, working hard for the Sky Beyond Trading Company's future prosperity. At this time, everyone's attention had already shifted from the Emperor and Empress to Qiao Yin and the other three women. The appearance of the four women not only attracted the gazes of the spectators, even Ying Zong and Empress Qian, who were standing on the ceremonial stage, looked at the four women with great interest. However, their eyes were filled with a kind of admiration. Chapter 100. We can begin now. He didn't want to draw too much attention to the four women. 3 of them were his women, and 1 of them was his older sister. He didn't like being watched and taken advantage of like this, so he urged them to begin. On the second floor of the Immortal Abode, little Qing was chattering away. Young miss, their clothes are so beautiful. They're just as beautiful as the one you brought back. Hu Yen replied absent-mindedly. However, she was thinking that if she was already Yang Chendong's woman, she would definitely have a seat on the ceremonial stage right now. Under Yang Chendong's urging, the ribbon-cutting began. Ying Zong and the other 3 each held a pair of scissors and cut the red silk in their hands. The Immortal Abode's workers, who had been arranged beforehand, removed the red silk covering the 3 words, Immortal Abode. Not only that, but the originally red Immortal Abode suddenly changed. The red disappeared without a trace, and was replaced by a bright, transparent, and sturdy-looking glass. It turned out that the red silk wasn't covering the outside of the Immortal Abode, but rather the inside. When the red curtains were pulled open from the inside, what was revealed was the clear, transparent glass. The current Great Ming Empire only produced colored glass, and the quality wasn't all that great either. The sudden appearance of so many pieces of glass, and so many of them at that, actually covered the entire Immortal Abode. It was easy to imagine just how shocking this was. Beloved official Yang, what is this? Ying Zong pointed at the clear glass with an expression of shock. Replying, Your Majesty, this item is called glass, and it came from overseas. It is transparent and can be seen from the inside and can also be seen from the outside. It also has the ability to block wind and rain. When used in a room, it can allow light from the outside to enter the room, making it much brighter. In winter, it can even allow sunlight to enter the room, making it much warmer. Yang Chendong had long since expected this question, so he gave a simple answer. Good stuff. Ying Zong couldn't help but sigh after hearing this. It's a good thing, but it's a bit too expensive. Just the glass used to decorate the Immortal Abode alone cost over 100,000 taels of silver. If the scale of the project is even larger, I'm afraid the cost will only increase. Yang Chendong was afraid that Ying Zong would ask for an exorbitant price and wanted to use glass to decorate the palace. Therefore, he immediately asked the question. Sure enough, after hearing how expensive this thing was, just the Immortal Abode alone cost over 100,000 taels of silver. If it were to be installed in the entire Imperial Palace, even tens of millions of taels wouldn't be enough. He couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Then he turned to Hu Ming and said, Minister Hu, go back and supervise the Ministry of Works. See if they can produce such transparent glass. Yes, Your Majesty. Even though he wasn't the Minister of Works, Hu Shao still felt that the possibility of him creating one was too low. But since the Emperor had spoken, he naturally had to agree first. All right, Your Majesty. Now, please enter the main hall of the Immortal Abode. There is still a program waiting for Your Majesty's personal evaluation. Yang Chendong didn't want to waste too much time on the matter of glass. He immediately invited the Emperor and Empress inside. Understood. As soon as he heard that there was still a program, Yingzong immediately ignored the matter at hand. With a smile, he walked with the Empress into the immortal abode. While the officials were still curious about the effects of the glass and how it was produced, they saw the Emperor enter the immortal abode. One by one, they followed him in. As soon as they entered the main hall, they were greeted by the sight of a glass tower that made them gasp in surprise. Calling it a glass tower wasn't correct. It was more like a champagne tower. There were 5 floors in total, divided into a triangular shape. There were 35 transparent champagne glasses arranged on each floor. At the very top, there was only one glass. The further down one went, the more glasses there were. Beloved Minister Yang, what is this? Yingzong pointed at the transparent and exquisite glass tower with a curious expression. He'd originally thought that as the Emperor, he was already used to seeing all sorts of strange things in the world. However, after coming to the immortal abode today, he finally realized that there was no limit in the universe. Your Majesty, this is called a champagne tower. There are 5 floors in total, and the meaning behind it is that Your Majesty is the supreme ruler of the world. At that time, when the champagne is poured from the top, the drink will flow down from the first cup at the top until all the cups are filled with champagne. Yang Chendong explained in detail, causing Yingzong's eyes to brighten up. His curiosity was also piqued. Beloved Minister Yang, is there any explanation for pouring the champagne you speak of? Is it possible for us to do what we wish to do? Yingzong asked playfully. Naturally. Your Majesty is the supreme ruler of the world, so this matter should naturally be left to you. Servants, bring out the champagne. Yang Chendong laughed heartily as he waved his hand. A female attendant dressed in a black qipao immediately walked over and placed several large champagne bottles in front of the 6th young master. Yang Chendong handed a bottle filled with champagne to Yingzong and said respectfully, Your Majesty, please. He'd only asked out of curiosity. He hadn't expected Yang Chendong to agree so quickly. Now that he noticed that the officials had already walked into the hall, if he slipped up and spilled the champagne everywhere, wouldn't he become a laughingstock? Yingzong was a bit hesitant, and didn't immediately take the bottle. Yang Chendong seemed to have noticed the Emperor's awkwardness. He smiled and said, This subject is so bold as to ask Your Majesty Empress, and this subject to do this together. This was equivalent to sharing the risk. If something went wrong, they could push the blame onto Yang Chendong. Yingzong was overjoyed when he heard this. Today is an auspicious day for the Immortal Abode's grand opening. Everything will naturally be decided by Minister Yang. We will allow it. Thank you, Your Majesty. Yang Chendong had a flattered expression. Then, he took 2 more champagne bottles. After the 3 of them took one each, they stood in 3 different directions. Then, they raised the bottle and poured the champagne into the first glass on the champagne tower. Empress Chen and Yingzong imitated Yang Chendong's actions. They also raised their champagne bottles and poured the champagne into the tower. Pure champagne immediately flowed out, releasing a fragrant aroma and covering the entire tower like flowing water. The sparkling and translucent champagne flowed like a waterfall, covering every single glass and filling it to the brim. This scene caused the officials to cry out in surprise and cheers. Yang Chendong had already tested this champagne tower countless times to ensure its safety. So regardless of whether this was the first time it was poured or not, there wouldn't be any problems. At first, Yingzong was very careful when pouring the champagne. However, after discovering that there were no problems, his courage grew, and he poured the champagne much faster. In the end, he was actually the first one to finish. Naturally, Wang Zhan and the others cheered loudly. After Empress Chen and Yang Chendong finished pouring the champagne in their hands, the 25 glasses in the tower were filled to the brim. Then, the 6th young master asked the Emperor to take the first glass at the top. Empress Chen took the second glass, and Yang Chendong took the third. The other officials also stepped forward and took the 25 glasses according to their rank. Even so, there were still some officials who didn't get a glass of champagne. However, it was fine. Yang Chendong was already prepared. He waved his hand in the distance, and a row of male and female service staff wearing black waistcoats and black cheongsams walked over. Each of them held a silver platter in their hands, and on the platter was filled with champagne. Soon, everyone had a glass of champagne in their hands. Yang Chendong saw that the time was right, so he raised his glass and said loudly, For the prosperity of the great Ming dynasty, I invite everyone to drink this glass. Your Majesty, please. Please, everyone, let's drink together. Ingzong was in a good mood. He laughed and raised the champagne in his hand. Your Majesty, please. The officials also gave him face and drank in unison. Then they poured the champagne in their hands into their mouths. When it entered their mouth, it was sweet and refreshing. The taste was very comfortable, and after drinking it, everyone had a lingering aftertaste. Not bad. This thing tastes very good. Ingzong had eaten all kinds of delicacies in the world. It was already not easy for him to give such an evaluation after drinking the champagne. Of course, with Ingzong's evaluation, it would be difficult to sell champagne in the future. After the champagne celebration, Yang Qindong personally led the emperor and empress to the second floor of the immortal abode. The other officials of the third rank and above were led there by the service staff. Those of the third rank and below could only stay on the first floor. Fortunately, they weren't receiving outsiders today, so the place was quite spacious. The private rooms could be filled as many people as they wanted. On the second floor, Yang Qindong led Ingzong to a private room with the best view on the left. The room was about 70 to 80 square meters in size, and it even had a private washroom. There was a soft sofa, a wine cabinet, a table and chairs, as well as a bell tied to a string. Ingzong pointed at the bell and asked curiously, "What's this used for?" Replying to Your Majesty, "This is a bell. If there is any need, as long as you pull it gently, there will soon be service personnel outside." Yang Qindong reached out with a smile and pulled it casually. Immediately, a crisp bell sounded. Not long after, a voluptuous female attendant dressed in a black qipao walked in. "How may I help you, esteemed guest?" "Tell Madame Shui to prepare a song and a performance," Yang Qindong said with a smile as he watched the female attendant walk in. "Yes." After answering, the female attendant left, swaying her hips. Ingzong, who was watching from the side, nodded repeatedly. "Not bad, not bad. This is a good idea. Sir, we can also put something like this in our study. It will be much more convenient if we need someone to wait on us." Chapter 101. This servant obeys. Wang Zhan, who was serving at the side, hurriedly replied. On the other side, in the best private room on the right side of the second floor, Yang Qindong's eldest sister, Yang Fei, was accompanying Emperor Qian on the soft sofa and chatting. Yang Fei's health was not very good recently. Yang Qindong had been in the capital for a period of time, but he had not had the time to visit her. It was only when she had recovered recently that he could leave. Then, he would arrange such a mission to accompany Emperor Qian. As the eldest daughter of Yang Rong, Yang Fei was already 40 years old. However, because she had taken good care of herself and had inherited her mother's good looks, she looked graceful and luxurious. Sitting together with Emperor Qian, they could chat together. Similar to the men's private room, there was a separate bathroom and soft sofa. But what was missing was the wine cabinet, and what was replaced was an indoor swing. In this place, there was no wind or rain, and no one would notice, so they could swing as they pleased. It made people feel relaxed and happy. In addition, there was an extra chess table, which could be placed on several types of chess for people to use. If the guest needed it, they just had to pull the bell, and the service staff would send the required chess into the private room. For example, there was checkers. It was a type of chess that could be played by 2 to 6 people at the same time. The chessboard was hexagonal, and the chess pieces were divided into 6 colors. Each color had 10 or 15 chess pieces, and each player occupied a corner and had a chess piece of one color. Checkers was a board game that was widely spread and suitable for all ages. Gamoku. Not only could Gamoku strengthen one's thinking ability and raise one's intelligence, but it was also rich in philosophy and helped to cultivate one's mind. Moreover, the game was simple. As long as the 5 pieces were connected together, the horizontal and vertical lines could be counted. Modern poker and mahjong. These quickly became one of the favorite programs of the VIPs. At the same time, in order to take care of women, there were many drinks that women could eat on the menu. Men mainly drank tea and wine. Tea drinks, including single tea leaves and tea drinks prepared based on them. For example, ancient tea, bubble black tea, milk tea, fruit tea, etc. For example, tea guanyin, dahongpo, longan red date tea, pearl milk tea, etc. Compared to that time, there were now beer and red wine. Beer was mainly made from sprouted barley or wheat, also known as malt. Red wine was mainly made from grapes, salt, and sugar. Far away in Crimson City, there was already a winery. Currently, it had been successfully developed and was in the midst of mass production. When they opened for business, the first batch of wine arrived. Although the quantity was still not a lot, the price was high, so it was barely enough. When the production was expanded in the future, the problem of quantity would naturally not be a problem. Presumably, at that price, most people would only be able to taste it. Not many people would be willing to spend so much money to reach a certain level. There were even more types of women in this aspect, and they were mainly divided into 4 categories. Layered drinks, 30 g of seedless melon pulp, 20 g of pineapple jam, 10 g of milk. He squeezed the watermelon juice and poured it into a cup. Add a little water to the pineapple jam and squeeze the juice. Take a clean glass and fill it with ice cubes. When all the ingredients are ready, pour all the ice cubes out of the glass and pour the milk into the glass slowly. It's best not to pour it on the glass wall. Then, use a spoon to slowly pour the watermelon juice into the glass, and finally the pineapple juice into the glass. This way, the layered drinks were completed. The most important thing was that the density was controlled well. Carbonated drinks, or soft drinks as they were commonly known. For example, cola, Sprite, soda water, etc. They were named Coca-Cola, Jianghu, etc. Fruit and vegetable juices. Based on their characteristics, they could be divided into concentrated fruit juices, syrup juice, freshly squeezed fruit juices, diluted fruit juices, etc. They were named apple juice, orange juice, peach juice, etc. Milk drinks were drinks that contained a certain amount of fat and were made from it. For example, milk, soy milk, milkshakes, etc. They were named fresh milk, raw milk, sweet milk, walnut milk, and so on. There were already so many variations on the drinks, let alone the food. With the help of MSG, cooking wine, meat powder, and other condiments, the Immortal Abode's food was even better than the palace's. Of course, from time to time, Yang Chendong would also send some MSG over. After all, if one's life was better than the emperor's, then it would be dangerous. Sigh, my 6th brother has always liked to mess around since he was young. Look at all the things he's made. As his big sister, I don't even know what to say. Yang Fei smiled helplessly as she looked at the menu of food and drinks. But if one looked closely, they would be able to see the pride and gratification in her eyes. Of course, as his big sister, she had also thought about Yang Chendong's changes. When he was young, her 6th brother was the most honest of people, the type who only knew how to study every day. But after he grew up, he changed so much that she couldn't recognize him. Fortunately, one was married in the capital, while the other was living in the Yang clan's old residence in Jianghu Prefecture. After not seeing each other for so many years, it was normal for people to change. Even though Yang Fei spoke of helplessness, her face was filled with pride. When Empress Qian saw this, she smiled and said, "Yang Shima is a man of good fortune." As soon as he arrived in the capital, he brought the great Ming's auspicious potato. Now, he's created this immortal abode. He truly is a man of ability. Even His Majesty praises him from time to time. That's because of His Majesty and Empress Qian's good fortune. How could it be the work of a little brat like him? Yang Fei naturally didn't dare take credit for her 6th brother. The current world was under the rule of the Zhu clan. It was only right for them to be respected. By the way, Madame Wang, Yang Fei is married to Wang Meng. Is Yang Shima married yet? Empress Qian asked casually. Perhaps this was a common problem for women. When they gathered together, they would always gossip about others. I really didn't ask him. But I don't think so. Otherwise, he wouldn't have kept such an important matter from me, his big sister, Yang Fei said with a smile. Her little brother had grown up and was about to start a family. He was no longer the snot-nosed brat of the past. Not far from the Empress' private room, Yang Duo and Hu Yen had also reserved a room. The two of them had already lost count of how many times they'd rung the bell. There were many empty cups in front of them, and they looked like they wanted to try all of the drinks in the immortal abode today. I can't anymore, big sister Duo, I can't drink anymore. Hu Yen rubbed her round belly as she sat on the sofa and weakly shook her head. Her eyes were big, but her belly was small. She'd originally thought that she had some strength, but when she really started drinking, she realized that these things were really bloating. Even though there was a bathroom in the private room, she still ended up drinking until she was full. No matter how good the drinks were, she could only sigh. I can't either. Yang Duo also shook her head and sat down on the sofa. Then her body half collapsed. These things are too delicious. I don't want to give up on any of them, but I can't finish any of them. I can't continue to waste them like this. Hu Yan couldn't help but laugh when she saw the usually dignified Yang Duo acting like a little girl. Big sister Duo. You're still afraid of wasting things? With such a capable little brother, you don't have to worry at all. That's enough. Are you praising me? Or are you scolding me? I'm basking in your glory today. If you didn't have a supreme card, we wouldn't be wasting things like this. Oh right. Even I, as your big sister, only have a gold card with 5,000 taels of silver in it. How did you get a supreme card that doesn't cost you anything? Yang Duo retorted. At the same time, she stared at Hu Yan, waiting to see how she would respond. Aya, big sister Duo what are you talking about? Hu Yan's face instantly turned red after being hit on her soft spot. Right at this moment, the sound of music came from the stage on the first floor. Hu Yan used this as an excuse to lean against the transparent window and look down. She could see everything on the stage clearly, so she said, Big sister Duo the performance is about to start. Let's watch it together. This little girl. Seeing that Hu Yan didn't answer her question, Yang Duo let her off for now. She sat on the indoor swing and watched the performance on the stage. The stage on the first floor was about 400 square meters. It was much bigger than the one in 9 Arts Workshop and 100 Flowers Hall. At this moment, a group of girls in gorgeous dresses walked up the stage. They were all sisters invited by Lady Shui and Lady Xiang to help out. They all had a foundation in dancing. Of course, they also became talents in Yang Chendong's eyes. It wouldn't be long before they became part of the Yang Manor. The girls surrounded Lady Shui, who was wearing a festive red cheongsam, as she walked up the stage. She looked like a red flower set off by the green grass. She was so beautiful at this moment. Wow! She's so beautiful! After seeing Lady Shui's new outfit, the people upstairs and downstairs couldn't help exclaiming. Even in the private room where the emperor was, Zhu Qizhen kept nodding. He asked Wang Zhen, Sir, is it because of this woman that Shishang wants to kill Yang Shima? Yes. Hearing this, Wang Zhen felt cold sweat trickling down his forehead. After that incident, Yang Chendong said that he wouldn't pursue the matter. Wang Zhen locked Shishang up for a while and then let him out. That night, his right leg was chopped off by Hu Chongning, the town supervisor of the embroidered uniform guard, who was in a hurry to save someone. Because he didn't respond in time, when he came out, his legs were unevenly spaced, and he walked with a slight limp, becoming a real slope. This made Xi Ning very unhappy. He once told others that if he had the chance, he would teach Yang Chendong a lesson and make him like this to vent his anger. Chapter 102. Now that His Majesty suddenly asked about this matter, Wang Zhen's heart was startled. Ying Zong hadn't asked about this matter since he'd handed it over to him. But who knew if the emperor was paying attention? Even an idiot could tell that the immortal abode was going to be a place of great wealth in the future. As a collaborator, he was sure to earn quite a bit. Even if it was for his own sake, he had to ensure Yang Chendong's safety. From the looks of it, he needed to remind Xi Ning not to go overboard. Otherwise, it wouldn't look good on everyone. When Ying Zong heard Wang Zhen's ambiguous answer, he smiled and said, This girl is so beautiful. It must be said that this Yang Shima has profited from a disaster. It's not wrong for him to suffer a blade for this matter. Yes, your Majesty is right. One who survives a great disaster is bound to have good fortune in the future. Wang Zhen nodded and bowed in agreement. On the stage below, the dancers took their positions and made their preparations. All sorts of joyous music rang out. After a joyous prelude that no one had ever heard before, Madame Shui finally opened her mouth and sang loudly, Hey hi! Happy gongs and drums bring out the annual festivities. Beautiful dances bring out the jubilation of the solitary sky plains. The sun paints today red, and the flowers of life are our smiles. Hey hi! Today is a good day. Anything you wish for can come true. Tomorrow is a good day. When we open our doors, we welcome the spring breeze. The song was cheerful and bright. The theme was clear. and the meaning was clear. As soon as the song was played, everyone who heard it couldn't help but nod their heads. Choosing such a new song as the opening dance was just perfect. Coupled with the dance of those dancers, it gave people a visual impact and enjoyment. It was indeed the most appropriate scene. Madame Shui was also extremely excited. Wasn't this a performance for the emperor and all the other officials? Back when she was in 100 Flowers Hall, these people couldn't come because of their status. Even the fragrance of wine was afraid of the depth of the alley. But now, with the immortal abode as a platform, not only did they not feel the slightest bit embarrassed, they even felt honored. Things were just that miraculous. After the 6th young master took care of it, it was still the same thing, but it had a different ending and influence. Madame Shui was so excited that she tried her best to sing the song. She made the song sound festive, which attracted the applause of the people upstairs and downstairs. Some of the young officials were so happy that they even forgot that the emperor was not far away. They kept shouting that they wanted to reward them. It wasn't until one of their colleagues reminded them that they remembered that they were in the immortal abode, not the red light district they frequented. They all broke out in cold sweat, which made them look rather cute. In less than a cup of tea's time, the song ended. Madame Shui bowed to the audience upstairs and downstairs to express her gratitude, and then left the stage. Soon, 2 waiters in black jackets placed a small square table on the grandstand. There was a fan on the table, which was very eye-catching. It was time to prepare for the storytelling. But at that time, people had never seen such a thing. Storytelling was also a product of the late Qing and early Ming dynasties. For a time, no one knew what it was for. They didn't recall seeing anything like this in the repertoire they'd seen before. Just when everyone had not completely recovered from the good days and did not understand what was going to happen next, Yang Chendong strode onto the stage in a black robe. Yang Chendong's appearance immediately attracted everyone's attention. Everyone couldn't help but wonder, what's going on? Could it be that Yang Shima was going to perform like an actor? Is he really going to disregard his status like this? People's views were the hardest to change. Even after seeing how different the immortal abode was, it was still the same. Yang Chendong was already prepared for this, so he didn't bother to explain himself. He strode onto the stage and stood behind the small table. Then, he reached out and grabbed the table. He raised it up high and smashed it down. Bang! The sound of the impact jolted many people out of their reverie. Today, the emperor, empress, and hundreds of officials have come to congratulate the immortal abode on its grand opening. In order to express his gratitude, Chen Dong decided to tell a story. Whether it was right or wrong will depend on the benevolent and the wise. All right, let's begin. He brought up the emperor, saying that he was only going on stage because Ying Zong was here. For a moment, no one could criticize him. As everyone's attention fell on Yang Chendong, wanting to see what kind of trick he was going to play, the table was smashed down again. Dao to 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, scholarly fame, Empress Xia, Empress Shang and Zhou. The 5 hegemons of heroes and hegemons of spring and autumn, rise and fall in an instant. A few lines of names in the history of the Qing dynasty, countless barren hills in the northern sea. The fields of the predecessors, the lands of the descendants, are said to be a fierce struggle between dragons and tigers. There was a pause as soon as the word battle was spoken. Yang Fu, who had long since prepared himself, led a group of attendants to applaud and cheer loudly. Good. With someone leading the way, a few of the officials were also shocked by the opening poem. They all began to cheer in unison. Yang Chendong began to speak amidst the cheers. Starting today, we will talk about the 3 kingdoms. The first chapter is called, The Great River Flows East. What era was the 3 kingdoms? It was an era of turmoil and suffering, but it was also an era of heroes. We know that ever since Qin Shi Huang annexed the world, a unified country was established in this place. The Qin and Han dynasties were both unified countries. At the end of the Eastern Han dynasty, before the unification of the Western Jin dynasty, there was a special period. This is what we usually call the 3 kingdoms. Cao Cao once wrote a poem about this era. White bones are exposed in the wild, and there are no chickens for 1,000 miles. But at the same time, it was also an era of heroes. Only when the sea was turbulent can the true colors of heroes be revealed. In such an era, many people sacrificed their intelligence for the reunification of the country. For example, the ambitious and bold Cao Cao, the dedicated Zhuge Liang, the elegant and carefree Zhou Yu, the tenacious Liu Bei. As soon as Yang Qindong spoke, the people who did not understand what he was going to do immediately quieted down. They could tell that this was the story that the sixth young master was going to tell. Moreover, he was going to tell it in a way that they had never seen before. But it had to be said that this kind of format was very attractive. In less than a quarter of an hour, Yang Qindong began to immerse himself in the history of the three kingdoms. The entire immortal abode quieted down. Everyone's thoughts seemed to be driven by his mouth. Even some of the women who did not like history listened attentively. On the second floor, in the private room where Hu Yan was, the maid Xiaoqing could not help saying as she looked at the young lady who was staring at Yang Qindong through the glass. Dong Shuai is so impressive. He speaks so well. Even I can understand a lot of things. Don't say anything. Hu Yan suddenly turned around and gestured for Xiaoqing to keep quiet, giving her a fright. After turning around, Hu Yan turned around and stared out the glass again. Her face was filled with admiration, longing, and even pride. This was the man she liked. He would always be the best and most outstanding. In the immortal abode, Hu Yan wasn't the only one. There were also a few of the family members of the officials who had been invited, especially the unmarried girls. They were all staring at Yang Qindong with wide eyes. It had to be said that having a private room in glass was a good thing. They didn't have to worry about others seeing them. Their gazes could become unbridled. To hell with the gentlemanly behavior of a gentleman. Of the many girls present, it was inevitable that some of them would fall in love. Some of them had already decided that when they returned, they would beg their parents to send someone to the Yang clan to propose marriage. There were many times when women were just like men. When they took the initiative, it was quite frightening. Following Yang Qindong's analysis of the history and characters of the three kingdoms from shallow to deep, everyone watched with relish. Even Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect was completely captivated. As the emperor of a country, familiarizing oneself with history was a compulsory course. The ancestors had long ago passed down a message that history could be used as a mirror to determine the rise and fall of a country. However, what he had learned was the rigid teachings of those teachers. What he had learned was dry and dull. How could he possibly compare to Yang Qindong's? His explanations were so interesting and easy to understand. Sigh, if I had such a teacher back then, I don't think my studies would be so boring. Ying Zong sighed as if he was speaking from the bottom of his heart. Your Majesty, why don't we have Yang Shima speak to you alone in the palace? Wang Zhan felt that this was an opportunity to curry favor. How could he let it slip by? As expected, Ying Zong was a little tempted. However, he quickly shook his head. Forget it. Yang Shima isn't even as old as us. There's no need to bring this up again in the future. Only now did Wang Zhan remember Yang Qindong's age. However, with his vast knowledge and steady temperament, it was easy to forget his age. It was this servant who was impetuous. Thinking that if Yang Qindong really became the emperor's teacher, the emperor's incompetence would be even more obvious. Thus, Wang Zhan quickly nipped this idea in the back of his head. On the stage, the first chapter, The Great River Flows to the East, was finally finished. Yang Qindong bowed and stepped down from the stage with a sentence. If you want to know what will happen later, please listen to the next chapter. Good. One more chapter. An addicted official saw that Yang Qindong was about to leave the stage and hurriedly shouted. One more chapter. One more chapter. For a moment, there were many people who wanted to follow the trend and continue listening. Regarding this, Yang Qindong stopped in his tracks. He smiled and cupped his fists towards the crowd. As I said earlier, it's because the emperor is here that I came out to embarrass myself. If everyone still wants to continue listening, from tomorrow onwards, there will be other people who will continue telling the story of the three kingdoms. At that time, everyone can come and support me. Chen Dong thanks you here. Chapter 103. He cupped his fists and saluted the crowd, then walked off the stage with large strides. No matter what, he was still a dignified official of the 5th rank. How could he possibly tell stories for fun? The reason he was the first to do so was because the immortal abode had opened for business, and the emperor had personally come. He wanted to express his stance, and also because he wanted to earn the reputation of being the progenitor of storytelling. After today's events, anyone who tried to learn storytelling would follow in his footsteps. Such people had to be crowned as the progenitor of storytelling. Just the thought of it made him excited. Yang Qindong walked off the stage, And in his place, many people walked onto the stage. Soon after, the narrator's voice rang out. Next, please enjoy the large-scale musical, The Legend of the White Snake. The first scene of the musical was a shepherd boy saving a snake. The voice was spoken by Madame Snow, who had the best voice. It was a pleasure to listen to. Soon after, a child dressed like a shepherd boy walked onto the stage, followed by a snake catcher with a bamboo basket on his back. As the two of them appeared, the narrator continued to explain, Baisuzhen was originally a little white snake that cultivated in the wilderness. One day, the little white snake was captured by Snake Elder and was almost killed. Fortunately, she was saved by a little shepherd boy who was passing by. Su Zhan secretly swore that this life-saving grace would forever be engraved in her heart. Time passes easily in the mountains, but the world has been prosperous for thousands of years. After 1,700 years of cultivation, Su Zhan finally shed her snake body and was able to transform into a human form. Originally, she wanted to go to Mount Amei to continue her cultivation. However, after being guided by Guanyin, she remembered that there was still a relationship in the world that had yet to end. Following Guanyin's guidance, Su Zhan came to Hangzhou's West Lake to look for the benefactor of her previous life. As the narration reached this point, a burst of exclamations suddenly came from the stage. It turned out that bursts of white fog had suddenly appeared. Everyone who had never seen such a scene before was shocked. They did not know what was going on. Some of the quick-witted ones even opened their mouths, ready to shout out the word, flood, at any moment. However, just as everyone's faces were filled with confusion and even panic, a young and beautiful woman dressed in white walked out of the white fog. Her fringe was slanted in front of her forehead, revealing part of her forehead, which made her look even more feminine. She was White Lady, played by Lady Xiang, who had shocked the world with her dance. As soon as Lady Xiang appeared in the gradually dissipating white fog, she immediately attracted everyone's attention. Some of the officials even had their mouths and eyes wide open. Saliva even flowed out from their chins. After the stunning appearance, Lady Xiang's equally beautiful voice was also brought into full play. Baisuzhen at the foot of Mount Qingqing. I've cultivated my body in the cave for 1,000 years. I've worked hard to achieve the Tao, and I've been reborn into a human being. Wholeheartedly following the Tao without any distracting thoughts, converting to the three treasures and abandoning the mortal world. I beg the Bodhisattva to enlighten me and save my chastity. Lady Xiang, like Lady Shui, was soon remembered by everyone with the poem, The White Quality at the foot of Mount Qingqing. In the women's private room on the second floor, Hu Yan looked at Lady Xiang with some envy and murmured in her heart, Shameless, shameless. How many women have you had? Should I also hurry up? Suddenly, Hu Yan stood up abruptly and pulled Yang Duo, who was staring at the stage, and said, Seventh sister? Where is eldest sister? I want to see her. Eldest sister is in the room next to us. Yang Duo said without looking back. At this time, even if there was an urgent matter, she couldn't delay her from seeing White Lady. On the stage, little Qing, who was played by the maid Chun Tao, also appeared. Then it was Cui Na-er, the former brothel keeper of the Jiu Arts Workshop, who was dressed as a man. After changing into a man's dress, she looked so delicate and handsome, which immediately attracted the hearts of many young ladies among the officials. Cui Na-er, who was in her 20s, originally thought that her career on stage was over long ago. She didn't expect that the sixth young master would give her such an opportunity. She naturally cherished it very much. Whether it was her lines or lyrics, she had practiced them many times in private. She had also prepared for today's appearance for a long time. When she saw the fervent gazes all around her, she knew that she had succeeded this time. The three women appeared, and for a moment, everyone was talking to each other. White Lady's dignified beauty, Su Xian's honest kindness, and little Qing's lively cuteness were all perfectly displayed by the three of them. They became the classics of the day. When everyone's eyes fell on the stage, Hu Yan walked out of the private room and went to the room next door, where Empress Qian and the eldest sister of the Yang clan, Yang Fei, were. Good performances were endless, good food was endless, and good wine was endless. During the performance of White Lady's legend, lunch was sent to the various private rooms. The sight and taste were both enjoyable, and it made many people feel that the immortal abode was truly worthy of being called a place where immortals resided. After White Lady's legend, New songs were played one after another. Exploring Qingshui River, friends. Wishing we last forever. Many stories in a small town, and so on. These were all songs that had been circulating in the capital in recent days, as well as new ones. For a moment, the audience was filled with joy. Many of the young master's young ladies from important officials' families had even made up their minds. When they returned, they would withdraw money to buy membership cards. This immortal abode was simply too fun. This was especially true for the young ladies of the boudoir. They usually stayed at home, studying women's mantras. When would they have the chance to come out and play? And even if they did come out, where would they go? But now, Yang Chendong had given them a place to pass the time, and that was the immortal abode. Here, they could have their own private rooms, and they didn't have to worry about being seen by others. This allowed them to be even more unbridled. In addition, there were delicacies, desserts, and beautiful music that couldn't be found anywhere else. If they didn't know how to spend their money here, then they would have lived their lives in vain, and they would have let down their good backgrounds. The opening of the immortal abode was an eye-opener for everyone. Even the emperor and empress were satisfied, and they felt a sense of enjoyment that they had never felt before. Good times always passed by quickly, and it was time for the emperor to leave. Ingzong had originally planned to eat dinner here before leaving, but when he saw the crowd of people waiting to enter the immortal abode through the glass window of his private room, he gave up on that idea. It wouldn't be good for him to monopolize this place and ignore the feelings of the people. In the end, Ingzong left with Empress Qian and the other officials. It was clear that neither Empress Qian nor the other officials had any intention of enjoying themselves to the fullest. In response, Ingzong magnanimously expressed that they could come and play whenever they had time. Only then did everyone remember that the immortal abode had already opened for business in the capital, and they couldn't run away. They could come and play whenever they wanted, and only then did they leave, satisfied. When everyone left, they received a beautiful gift. It was a box of 4 beautiful transparent glasses. Before glass was a new thing, this gift was naturally viewed as a treasure. Anyone who received this gift couldn't stop smiling, praising Yang Jima for being so good at handling matters. After the emperor and his officials left, the immortal abode was filled with many young master sons of merchants and officials with membership cards. Because their status wasn't high enough, they naturally couldn't enter the immortal abode. Now that they had the chance, everyone wanted to be the first to enter. Many people entered, but they were quickly mesmerized by the exquisite decorations of the immortal abode. They looked around like country bumpkins entering a city. Soon after, fine wine and delicacies were served, along with new songs. These people's pockets were emptied, and they all sighed. Silver really was a good thing. The immortal abode's grand opening had cost them a lot of silver to entertain the emperor and officials in the morning and afternoon, but by night, they had made a killing. Only when the clock struck and the curfew was about to begin did they reluctantly leave. But at the same time, they agreed to come back early the next morning to drink tea, chat, and watch programs. This was truly one of life's greatest pleasures. Yang Chendong's group left the immortal abode and headed for the Yang clan manor 15 li south of the capital. The 6th young master sat in the same carriage as Qiao Yin. After a busy day, Lady Xiang and Lady Shui were both exhausted. They naturally stayed the night in the immortal abode, allowing Qiao Yin to be alone with the 6th young master. Her face was filled with happiness and joy. Young master, Su Yozhen sent a message. The carriage suddenly stopped, and Tiger's Mane appeared. He placed a bamboo tube in Yang Chendong's hand. Yang Chendong reached out and opened the tube. After taking out the secret letter and reading it, Yang Chendong calmly put it back. He then closed his eyes and thought for a while before saying, "Let him tell the Imperial censor of the left, Wang Wenyi. He should know what to do." "Understood," Tiger's Mane replied. He turned around and told his deputy, Yang Chendong, about the 6th young master's orders. This deputy director of the security bureau was a private member of the Yang clan that Yang Chendong rarely saw. Wang Wenyi, Imperial censor of the left, a 3rd-ranked official of the Imperial court. He was different from the other important officials, who spent the day playing, drinking, and having fun. As Imperial censors, their job was to supervise the officials. Although it sounded very impressive, there were many things they couldn't do about it. For example, they couldn't participate in something as beneficial as the immortal abode's opening ceremony. Since they were supposed to supervise the officials, How could they be part of the same group? There had to be a difference. As a result, those in the position of Imperial censor were usually rather poor. Wang Wenyi was standing in such a position. Unlike everyone else, his life was still good. Not to mention other things, he had married as many as 7 concubines. Where did that come from? It was all given to him by his father-in-law. Father Wang was a general term used by some spineless people in the imperial court and eunuch Wang Zhan, who had absolute power. Chapter 104. Since he was called father, he naturally had to submit to someone else. It was precisely because he had submitted to Wang Zhan that he was able to obtain a high position, ride a fine horse, and even have a large group of wives and concubines. He had been given the position of Imperial censor of the left in order to control the Imperial censorate and prevent anyone from suddenly harming Wang Zhan. Even though he couldn't openly commit corruption like the other officials, he still had money to spend. After court, Wang Wenyi had nothing to do at home, so he was full of energy. It was now dark, and he was currently admiring the flowers in the courtyard with a concubine he had recently married. His personal attendant suddenly came to report that Su Youzhen, Su Qinghui, had arrived. Please. A late-night visit was obviously an important matter. Wang Wenyi waved his hand and had a maid take the concubine away before heading to the central room. Su Youzhen was pacing back and forth in the room like an ant on a hot pan. When he heard the sound of footsteps and turned around to see Wang Wenyi, he immediately cupped his fist and bowed. Lord Wang, I have no choice but to disturb you so late at night. Did something happen? Wang Wenyi acted as if nothing had happened, but he was inwardly on guard. Lord Wang, it's like this. Sun Qing, Dong Kund, Lin Xiangfeng, and Yin Meng, as well as Sichuan Imperial censor Shen Yu, have come to find this lowly official. They want me to join them in impeaching Crown Prince Yang Chendong tomorrow morning. This lowly official does not know what to do. I have come to invite Lord Wang over, Su Youzhen said with a humble expression as he observed Wang Wenyi's expression. Impeach Yang Chendong? What's the reason? Wang Wenyi became much more serious when he heard about Yang Chendong. As Wang Zhan's trusted aide, how could he not know that the 6th young master of the Yang clan was currently doing business with him? If something really happened, it would be detrimental to his father. It said that Yang Shima sent immortal abode membership cards worth several thousand taels of silver to the families of 3rd rank and above officials in the capital, Su Youzhen said seriously. Last time, after being bribed by Yang Chendong, they put on a double act and had the opportunity to publicly impeach the 6th young master in the imperial court. Sure enough, according to the previous plan, the matter was left unsettled. From then on, not only did he receive a large sum of money from Yang Chendong, but he was also promoted by 1 rank. At the same time, he became an upright official in the eyes of many people. Even the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Yu Qian, who looked up to Wen Tianxiang as a role model, had publicly praised him more than once, saying that there should be more Su Youzhen in the court to ensure that the governance of the officials was clean. For this reason, when Sun Qing, Dong Kund, and the others were preparing to impeach Yang Chendong, they naturally found Su Youzhen. This was how Yang Chendong found out the news immediately and pointed the problem to Wang Wenyi. Is there such a thing? If that's the case, we'll just do what we need to do. Wang Wenyi was startled when he heard such a reason. If it was true, then with this reason, he could really make things difficult for Yang Chendong. However, what he couldn't understand was why Su Youzhen would reveal this matter to him in advance. The two of them didn't have any interactions before. Unable to understand Su Youzhen's intentions, Wang Wenyi simply pretended to be ignorant and acted as if he was doing official business. Seeing Wang Wenyi acting as if he was doing official business, Su Youzhen cursed in his heart for being a B*TCH, and still wanting to pretend to be chaste. However, his mouth didn't stop as he said, Lord Wang, to be honest, this official has respected eunuch Wang for a long time. If there is any opportunity to be of service to eunuch Wang, this official will not hesitate to die 1,000 times. Hee, I know. How about this, if I don't pass on the news to you, then do what you should do. These words allowed Wang Wenyi to understand Su Youzhen's intentions. It seemed that this person also wanted to get on Wang Zhan's good side. No wonder he still came to pass on the news at such a late hour. Although he understood Su Youzhen's intentions, Wang Wenyi's power was limited and he didn't dare to make a decision for Wang Zhan. Thus, he used this method to reply to tell Su Youzhen that he was aware of her attitude towards Father Wang. However, Whether or not he would accept her still depended on eunuch Wang's opinion. Su Yozhen was a shrewd person and naturally understood the meaning behind the words. Immediately, her face lit up with joy. Then I will have to trouble Lord Wang. As she spoke, she whispered. This official placed a box in front of Lord Wang's backyard. Inside it is a token of my appreciation. Su Yozhen nodded without batting an eyelid, indicating that she understood. Immediately, she left the main room with satisfaction. Then, Wang Wenyi called for the housekeeper and asked him to bring in the box in the backyard. Not long after, he saw the neatly arranged 2,000 taels of silver in the box. These taels of silver were enough to cover several years of his salary. Wang Wenyi's face lit up with joy. Come, change this official's robes. I want to see Father Wang. The capital had long been under a curfew, but for a third-rank official like Wang Wenyi, it was still extremely convenient for him to move around. This was especially so when he was eunuch Wang Zhan's subordinate. This was already a public matter, so naturally, no one dared to block his sedan. However, he didn't know that in the darkness, there was a pair of eyes watching his every move. It wasn't until he entered the palace that the owner of that pair of eyes left quietly. In the morning court session, as Zhu Qizhen sat on the dragon throne, all of the military affairs of the country came crashing down on him like a surging wave. Fortunately, the matters discussed in the morning court session today were all good matters. For example, Deng Maoqi's rebellion in Fujian was basically over. Deng Maoqi was killed in the chaotic battle, and his henchmen were either killed, captured, or escaped. It would be difficult for them to cause any more trouble. Minister of War Kuang Yi had just finished speaking when Minister of Revenue Wang's was said that the potatoes had fully matured. The next step was to distribute the seeds. If the emperor did not have any special requests, then he would have a good talk with Yang Shima about the seed distribution. We don't have any other requests. We just want the potatoes to mature as quickly as possible. Also, we have to prevent the potato seeds from flowing out. Teacher, for this matter, have the East Faction Guards and the Ironclad Guard keep a close eye on it. Ing Zong recalled the warnings that the officials had given him and added on. This official obeys. This old servant obeys. Wang Zhua and Wang Zhan both agreed. Ing Zong nodded and said, What other matters do you have? Bring them all up. This official has a memorial. Following a shout, Sun Qing, Dong Kund, Su Yozhen, and the other 4 Imperial censors all knelt on the ground. When an Imperial censor stepped out, nothing good ever happened. The officials all frowned slightly when they saw this. Even Ing Zong was a bit displeased. These Imperial censors were always the type to wish for the world to be in chaos. Whenever they had something to report, it would always cause him to be displeased. However, this was still their duty, so no one could criticize them. For this reason, he could only do his best to remain calm and ask, Dear officials, what matters do you have to report? Your Majesty, this official is impeaching the Crown Prince, Yang Chendong. Before the immortal abode opened for business, he gave membership cards to the families of all the officials of the 3rd rank and above in the capital. The amount of money involved is extremely high, reaching several 100,000 taels. Imperial censor Sun Qing reported loudly as he knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, Yang Chendong is clearly trying to bribe the people. Your Majesty, please punish him, Imperial censor Dong Kund said. Your Majesty, this is a sign of forming a clique for personal gain. This official requests that Your Majesty immediately issue an order to arrest this guilty official, Yang Chendong, and issue an imperial edict to investigate this matter, Imperial censor Lin Xiangfeng said as he kowtowed on the ground. Your Majesty. The other Imperial censors also began to criticize Yang Chendong. From their words, it was as if this crown prince was already an unpardonable criminal. Looking at the Imperial censors kneeling on the ground one by one, Ing Zong felt a headache coming on. He really couldn't understand. He was just a minor Class 5 official. He didn't have any authority and didn't have any position. How could he be so disliked by others? Bribing the people's hearts? Forming a clique for personal gain? Was this really a rebellion? Ing Zong didn't understand, but the other officials were furious. On the surface, they were criticizing Yang Chendong for bribery, but they were the ones who had taken the bribes. This was basically a net that had brought down a whole bunch of people. As a result, the faces of all the officials of the 3rd rank and above in the imperial court turned ashen. Those with bad tempers could no longer suppress their anger. They began to criticize. When did Yang Chendong give us money? He only gave us a membership card out of politeness. There was no money in that card. That's right. There was only a card, but no money. How could it be called bribery? The officials began to refute the imperial censors. Ingzong couldn't help but chuckle as he watched from his throne. It was rare for me to see an imperial censor infuriating the officials. Usually, when something like this happened, there would only be a few officials who were involved in it who would refute it. But today, when more than half of the officials opposed it, it was very rare. Ingzong viewed everything that was happening in front of him as a show. However, there were some people who didn't think that way. What they were thinking about was why there were people looking for trouble with Yang Chendong today, after the immortal abode had opened for business yesterday. Who had they offended this time? If they hadn't offended anyone, why were there so many imperial censors standing out at the same time? It was obvious that someone had colluded with them beforehand. Otherwise, how could there be such a commotion? The imperial court was divided into 3 groups. One group was composed of the imperial censors who were criticizing Yang Chendong. The other group was composed of the officials who had been implicated. The last group was composed of officials whose ranks weren't high enough and weren't involved. They watched everything unfold in front of them as if they were watching a show. The officials retaliated, and the censors rebutted, saying that they were only speaking on behalf of Yang Chendong because they had received benefits. Truly, everyone had their reasons. Until one person walked out from the class seat, everyone's eyes fell on him at the same time. Chapter 105. Your Majesty, please allow this subject to report. As soon as this person appeared, he didn't even look at the imperial censors. Instead, he directly knelt on the ground and spoke to the emperor. Beloved official, Yu has presented a memorial. Zhu Qizhen nodded as he looked at this left assistant minister of the Ministry of War Yu Qian, who was rumored to live a very poor life. He wanted to hear what he had to say. This person was precisely Yu Qian. Perhaps it was because of his incorruptibility that the imperial censors had a hard time finding fault with him. Now that he'd taken the initiative to speak up, he immediately attracted everyone's attention. Ignoring the gazes of his colleagues, Yu Qian spoke in a heavy voice. Reporting to your Majesty, this subject was fortunate enough to visit the immortal abode yesterday and witnessed its luxuriousness. At the same time, this subject also received a membership card for the immortal abode. Furthermore, this subject took the initiative to check it out and found that it was only a card with no silver inside. These words came from Yu Qian's mouth, and with his character, if he said he'd checked it out, then he must have. No one had any objections to this. Seeing that no one refuted him, Yu Qian continued. This subject later found out that with this card, one can enjoy a discount when spending money in the immortal abode. Presumably, this is the only use of this card. As soon as he said this, Imperial Censor Sun Qing immediately chimed in. That's right, this is the use of this card. If someone uses this card to spend money, they can save quite a bit of silver in one go. In the long run, won't the total amount reach tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of silver? This is clearly Yang Chendong. Before Sun Qing could finish speaking, Yu Qian cut in. Your Majesty, this subject believes that this matter cannot be settled like this. This subject has already said that this is only a card, and that it can only be used if one spends money. As for someone like this subject, my monthly salary is barely enough to support my family. Where would I find the money to spend in a place as luxurious as the immortal abode? As such, this card's existence is no different from a piece of scrap paper, completely meaningless. This subject believes that your Majesty can ignore the words of the imperial censors and encourage the development of the immortal residence. A place like this that can enrich the entertainment of the common people should be encouraged by the country. Only when there are more immortals like this, the country's tax revenue will be more abundant. In the long run, the treasury will be full, which is a good thing for the country and the people. Yu Qian changed his usual self and took the initiative to speak up for Yang Chendong. At first, everyone was a little puzzled. Could it be that this person also received some benefits from Yang Shima? Otherwise, why would he put in so much effort, not hesitating to directly insult the imperial censors? However, it wasn't until the last few sentences that everyone came to their senses. It seemed like this person's intentions were in vain. He had set his sights on the tax revenue after the immortal abode flourished. Originally, when Ingzong heard Yu Qian's words, he was also suspicious. Could it be that this civil official who called himself Wen Tianxiang really wanted to go with the flow and clear his name like the other officials? However, when he heard Yu Qian's words, he finally understood. He nodded and said, "Beloved Yu's words are reasonable. As the saying goes, only when the country is strong can the people live and work in peace and contentment. Teacher, I'll have to trouble you to investigate the immortal abode's income. Afterwards, the tax rate will be 30 to 1. During Ran Xian's reign, the great Ming dynasty was prosperous, and the treasury was full. However, after more than 10 years, Ying Zong's hands had already begun to show signs of decline. For this reason, Zhu Qizhen had always been searching for a way to fill the treasury. Thus, the business tax became his goal. After seeing the prosperity of the immortal abode yesterday, Ying Zong returned to the palace and immediately came up with the idea of collecting the business tax. For no other reason than the fact that as the emperor of the great Ming dynasty, he couldn't even replace all the windows in the palace with glass. This made him feel a strong sense of defeat. In fact, Ying Zong still had something he didn't say out loud. As the emperor of a country, he actually wasn't as capable as an official who was younger than him. Yang Qindong could cover the immortal abode with glass, but as the emperor of a country, he couldn't. Didn't this mean that he wasn't even as good as an official? This was what he found hard to accept. Today, Yu Qian just so happened to mention that he wanted to collect the business tax from the immortal abode. How could Ying Zong be polite? He agreed in person and sent his most trusted teacher, Wang Zhan, to carry out this task. In Zhu Qizhen's heart, Wang Zhan was one of his own. If he was sent to carry out this task, he definitely wouldn't treat him unfairly. Wang Zhan hadn't expected this kind of result. Last night, Wang Wenyi had found him and reported this matter, but he hadn't taken it to heart. Even though he had the power and influence to nip everything in the bud, he hadn't done so. He'd also witnessed the prosperity of the immortal abode and saw its potential. He was also afraid that Yang Qindong would grow too big and become a threat to him. That was why he'd wanted to use the Imperial censor to warn the sixth young master. Wang Zhan had long thought that this kind of impeachment wouldn't be of much use. It involved all of the third rank and above officials in the capital. Even if he didn't do anything himself, these people alone would be enough to stop the Imperial censor's mouth. What he hadn't expected was that Yu Qian would take the initiative to jump out and say that he wanted to collect the business tax from the immortal abode. This caught him completely off guard. Fortunately, this matter still had to go through his hands. This became a bargaining chip in his negotiations with Yang Qindong. After witnessing the prosperity of the immortal abode, Wang Zhan was no longer satisfied with the 10% they'd agreed on. Yu Qian's sudden interruption caused the Imperial censor's impeachment to fail. However, it seemed like there was no victor, because the immortal abode had to pay the tax and pay the price. In the end, the court assembly dispersed. The Imperial censors left under the warning gazes of the officials. Not long after, Wang Zhan also left the palace, heading straight for the Yang Manor 15 li south of the city. Before leaving, Su Yozhen had already reported the situation of today's morning court assembly to the Bureau of Security. At that moment, Yang Qindong was in his study, looking at the report Tiger's Mane had sent over regarding today's morning court assembly. Because of Yu Qian's appearance, the outcome of what had originally been a muddled case had actually turned against him. He couldn't help but laugh in anger. This Yu Qian isn't fun at all. He's far from being as cute as that smoking, drinking, and perming guy from the future. Young master, what perming? Xiao Yin, who was serving him from the side, inadvertently overheard this and couldn't help but ask curiously. Haha, it's nothing. The young master was just thinking about some things and was just talking to himself. Yang Qindong couldn't help but laugh. Soon after, his expression became calm again. Yu Qian was a capable, talented, and upright official. What was even more rare was that this kind of person cared more about the people and not the king. Otherwise, in history, Zhu Qizhen wouldn't have been captured and he wouldn't have loudly said, "We are completely thinking for the country and not for ourselves." Then, Zhu Qiyu, the successor patriarch, wouldn't have ascended to the throne. He wasn't blindly loyal and was talented. If this kind of person came to Qiqian City, he would definitely be of great help to the new army and the new city's development. Yang Qindong liked talent. He knew what he needed to do. But as for Yu Qian, although he liked him, he also knew that now wasn't the time to recruit him. Even if he tried to recruit him, it would never work. If he wanted to be used by him, he could only use force. How would he use force? When would he use force? This was what Yang Chendong needed to consider. Forget it. Since you don't want to be an assistant minister, then I'll fulfill your wish. He smiled. He had already thought of a way to solve Yu Qian's problem, and it would be done once and for all. With a rough idea in mind, Yang Chendong began to consider the issue of taxation. When it came to doing business, paying taxes was a matter of course. However, this was not the case in the Ming dynasty. They didn't collect taxes from officials, eunuchs, or scholars. These three didn't just refer to business taxes, but agricultural taxes as well. This made the rich and powerful even richer. The commoners had to work hard for an entire year, but they couldn't even afford to buy food and clothing. With such a trend, the Ming dynasty's treasury became poorer and poorer. Yang Chendong understood this principle, which was why he used his status to open the immortal abode. Just by avoiding taxes, he could save a lot of money in a year. But he hadn't expected that Ying Zong would suddenly use Yu Qian to make such a move, catching him off guard. He couldn't help but wonder if it was because of his appearance that Ying Zong's thoughts had changed. If that was the case, then it wasn't a good thing. Yang Chendong wasn't a god, so he naturally had no way of knowing what kind of psychological changes Ying Zong would experience. However, there was one thing he had to take care of, and that was the issue of the immortal abode's taxes. Since the emperor had brought it up in court, it would be quite troublesome to avoid paying. How to reduce the amount of taxes needed to be considered. Fortunately, this matter had been left to Wang Zhen. If it had been left to Yu Qian, it would have been a real headache. However, even Wang Zhen was someone who ate people without spitting out their bones. He had to carefully consider how to deal with him. Outside the Yang clan manor, Wang Zhen had arrived. He had his own carriage, and there wasn't a single member of the embroidered uniform guard or the Eastern faction guards that didn't recognize him. When the carriage approached, a group of people knelt on the ground. Wang Zhen had long since gotten used to this kind of situation. He didn't even get out of the carriage, and directly drove towards the Yang clan manor's inner courtyard. Right now, the potato harvest was about to begin. Anyone who entered the Yang clan manor had to be strictly checked. Only someone of Wang Zhen's status could act so unbridled. The carriage continued forward until it reached the Yang clan manor's courtyard. When they didn't see Yang Chendong's figure, the embroidered uniform guard commander Chen Shi, who was also Wang Zhen's nephew, Wang Lin, arrogantly said, "What's wrong? You're just washing a horse. Why are you putting on such airs? Could it be that you don't know how to come out and welcome us?" The two servants, Yang Wu and Yang Lu, who were secretly paying attention to the movements in front of the courtyard, had sullen expressions on their faces. Their fists gradually clenched as they reached for their pistols by their waists. It was only a distance of 20 steps. They were confident that they could take the life of the person who shouted with a hook of their fingers. Chapter 106. Ha ha ha, I didn't know that Eunuch Wang would grace me with his presence. Forgive me for being late. A boisterous laugh rang out as Yang Chendong strode to the entrance of the courtyard. Ha ha, Ma Yang Xianxia is too polite. How could this eunuch not feel embarrassed? Wang Zhen, dressed in the robes of a eunuch, stepped out of the carriage and walked over to Yang Chendong. Yang Chendong's smile was the type that hid a knife in his sleeve, but Wang Zhen's smile was also the type that didn't reach his eyes. In the end, the two of them had only come together temporarily for the sake of mutual benefits. They couldn't even be considered allies, so how could they show their sincerity? Yang Chendong bowed and politely said, "Eunuch Wang, please." "Sixth young master, please." Wang Zhen heartily laughed and led the way forward, pulling Yang Chendong 2 steps behind. It was as if he was saying that this was his residence, not the Yang clan manor. Once the host and guest were seated in the main hall, a very ordinary servant brought 2 cups of tea before bowing and retreating. Whenever Yang Chendong's guests came, Chowyin would bring them tea, but Wang Zhen didn't even get to enjoy this treatment. From this, one could see that in the eyes of the 6th young master, this person wasn't even worth an ordinary guest. Wang Zhen naturally didn't know about the Yang clan manor. The Eastern Depot and the embroidered uniform guard had countless spies, and many of the important officials of the capital were under surveillance. However, this didn't include Yang Chendong. Not being qualified was one thing, but this place was already surrounded by spies, so there was no need to keep an eye on them. "The tea is not bad," It's much better than the last time. Looks like the sixth young master has earned quite a bit of money. Wang Zhan said with a fake smile after dipping his lips into the tea as if it was for show. Yang Qindong knew that Wang Zhan was reminding him, so he smiled and said, "You're too kind. This is all thanks to Eunuch Wang's good fortune. Of course, Eunuch Wang has a share of the immortal abode's income." Wang Zhan let out a long sigh, as if depressed. He glanced at Yang Qindong out of the corner of his eye, then fell silent. His expression seemed to be saying, "Hurry up and ask me why I'm sighing." How could Yang Qindong not know what Wang Zhen meant when he pretended to be depressed? Since he was going to put on an act, of course he had to go all the way. He immediately went along with the other party's wishes and asked curiously, "Why is Eunuch sighing?" After a moment's silence, Wang Zhen finally spoke. Eunuch Wang, yesterday's, Wang Zhen's. You didn't know that there were people, because you teat yours. 8. Teat know that. T's eunuch. Of such, teat, s. Which bastard can't bear to see others doing well and came up with such a despicable idea? I curse him to die a horrible death. Yang Qindong flew into a rage. His usual gentlemanly demeanor was nowhere to be found. He stood up from his chair and began cursing. She scolded Wang Zhan to the point that he frowned. He thought to himself, where does this look like someone who is well read? This is clearly one of those unreasonable shrews. Wang Zhan listened to Yang Qindong's cursing for a good while. Then, as if he was tired, he sat back down in his chair, panting. Eunuch Wang, tell me who did it. I'll buy his life with silver. His words were spoken in an imposing manner. In reality, Yang Qindong was indeed very rich. He'd earned over 2 million taels of silver from the Immortal Abode's membership cards alone. And that wasn't even counting the people who'd be applying for membership cards soon. There were a few people who'd been waiting to see if the Immortal Abode was as good as they'd been described. After yesterday's events, these people probably wouldn't hesitate any longer. Wouldn't the money still roll in? With money, Yang Qindong's words naturally became much more confident. Now that he dared to say that he'd buy his life with money, it made sense. At the very least, it suited his current mood. Seeing Yang Qindong so angry that he'd even go so far as to say that he'd buy his life with money, Wang Zhan couldn't help but sneer inwardly. Youngsters are youngsters, after all. They can't keep their cool. One had to understand that these words were already quite a bit of leverage. Even if Wang Zhan used these words to arrest Yang Qindong, the other officials wouldn't be able to say anything. However, Yang Qindong still had a use for him, so he might as well keep his life for now. Since he was a fat sheep, the fatter it was, the more meat he'd get when slaughtered. Wang Zhan let out another long sigh. His tone was earnest, as if he were an elder lecturing a junior. Sixth young master, you shouldn't be so impulsive. Not everything can be solved with silver. All right, you don't need to worry. This duke has already taken care of the matters in the morning court. Taken care of? Yang Qindong pretended to be extremely shocked. At first, he was dumbfounded. Then, as if he'd understood something, he laughed heartily. That's right. How could I have forgotten about father-in-law? With father-in-law's abilities, wouldn't resolving such a small matter be a piece of cake? When Wang Zhan saw that Yang Qindong was about to start flattering him, he was worried that he'd continue to nag for a long time. He hurriedly waved his hands and said, "The matter of your impeachment has been resolved. However, the current emperor has also issued an imperial edict that the Immortal Abode must pay taxes. He's even delegated this task to this duke. Sixth young master, what do you think we should do?" Yang Qindong, who just calmed down, immediately jumped to his feet when he heard the words taxes. Taxes? Why? The other officials don't have to pay taxes. Even those who haven't yet become officials don't have to pay taxes. This young master is still a fifth-rank official, isn't he? Why should I pay taxes? I'm not paying. Yang Qindong's face was completely that of a scoundrel. When Wang Zhan saw all of this, his evaluation of Yang Qindong in his heart became even lower. Wasn't this person supposed to do great things? How did this Immortal Abode manage to come up with so many tricks? Wang Zhan felt a bit of disdain in his heart, but he didn't let it show on his face. On the contrary, he put on a look of concern for Yang Qindong. This is an imperial edict from His Majesty. Why don't you pay some taxes first? Do I really have to pay them? When he heard the words His Majesty, Yang Chendong seemed to calm down a lot. However, he leaned forward and said in a quiet voice, "Father-in-law, you also have shares in the immortal abode. If you have to pay taxes, then you'll have to share in father-in-law's profits as well." I only have 10%. It's nothing much. Even if I have to split it, I probably won't get much. Wang Zhan acted as if he didn't care at all. He really didn't seem to care, but Yang Chendong knew that after so many years of monopolizing power, Wang Zhan had long since developed a habit of doing everything he wanted. When it came to splitting his wealth, he probably wouldn't even ask for a single copper coin less. Similarly, once money entered his pocket, he probably wouldn't be willing to part with it if he couldn't take it out. The only reason he said this was because he wanted to fish for more benefits. Knowing the other party's temperament was the same as knowing his trump card. Yang Chendong sighed and said, "Fine. Since this is His Majesty's wish, then this subject will pay. However, this way, father-in-law's monthly income will be much less." He had originally been immensely pleased with himself, waiting to see what kind of price Yang Chendong would pay to refuse to pay the taxes. However, he didn't expect that Yang Chendong would actually cower and agree. What was the meaning of this? This script was completely different from what he had imagined. At this moment, it was Wang Zhan who was put in a difficult position. If he really had to pay the taxes, he would naturally have to share his benefits. Just as Yang Chendong thought, for a person with such great power, he would always be the one to receive benefits. How could he possibly push the benefits away? "No, you can pay the taxes, but you can't give me a share. Of course, I will take a little bit less as a token of appreciation." Wang Zhan's reaction was extremely fast. In just a few breaths of time, he had thought of a countermeasure and expressed his thoughts. Yang Chendong pretended to be shocked as he looked at Wang Zhan. Soon after he stuttered, "Eunuch means that your share won't change? Then how will it be calculated?" "This tax will definitely be deducted from the general account." "No matter, I'll split my share first. The rest will be taxed according to the ratio." Wang Zhan's eyes narrowed as he spoke with a smile, as if he was talking about something insignificant. Yang Chendong cursed Wang Zhan's greed inwardly. He put on a troubled expression and replied, "But if we do that, it will affect the operations of the sky beyond heaven. I won't hide it from father-in-law. Originally, I was planning to use the immortal abode's income to purchase goods for the Sky Beyond Heaven Trading Company. You also know that glass and mirrors are all very expensive. Without sufficient funds, it's impossible to do anything. And if we succeed, we'll earn mountains of gold and silver. At that time, I was even prepared to give father-in-law 40% of the profits. Sigh, I'm afraid that once we pay the taxes, we won't have enough funds." He shook his head bitterly as he slammed his palms on the table, as if he really had missed out on something good. "Wait a moment." Wang Zhan originally had a cold expression, waiting for Yang Chendong to take the initiative to give him some benefits. However, when he heard that 40% of the profits would be given, his expression immediately changed. He could no longer maintain his previous calm. "Sixth young master, what did you just say? 40%? That's right. 40%. Yang Chendong nodded with an expression that said it was indeed so. Then he added, "Of course, this is under the condition that there is a large amount of available funds. For example, if Eunuch Wang can lend me 2 million taels of silver, in addition to the fact that I don't have to worry about taxes, it is reasonable to take out 40% of the benefits. Unfortunately, since even His Majesty has issued a decree, I'm afraid that it will be very difficult to fulfill." An extremely regretful expression appeared on his face, as if all the beautiful things had vanished into thin air. Chapter 107. No, didn't this Duke say it already? His Majesty left everything in my hands, so this Duke is naturally the one making the decisions. Everything can be discussed. Enough benefits were enough to drive someone crazy. Wang Zhan finally couldn't remain calm under the temptation of 40% of benefits. His expression was no longer as aloof as before. Instead, it was one of deep concern. "I just don't know how much this 40% will bring me in a month." If we really get 2 million taels of silver, then after a year, the immortal abode and sky beyond heaven's monthly profits should be 40% should be around 100,000 taels, right? Yang Qindong muttered to himself as he counted on his fingers. Then, he gave Wang Zhen an extremely accurate number. Wang Zhen's left eye twitched when he heard that he could get 100,000 taels of silver in a month. This number was already more than what he could get from all the other businesses combined. Didn't that mean that as long as he had Yang Qindong's support, he would have an endless supply of money to spend? He could do as many things as he wanted. Of course, Wang Zhen also knew that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. If he wanted to achieve this, he would have to pay a great price. At the very least, he would have to fork out 2 million taels of silver right now. The question was, did Wang Zhen have it? The answer was obvious. Of course he did. After all these years of plundering and poking around, he had already accumulated quite a bit of savings. Even though he was still a bit short of 2 million taels of silver, with his charisma, he would be able to quickly make up for it. Then, should he give it to Yang Qindong? Or should he trust him? Wang Zhen was deep in thought as he considered the feasibility of this step. Yang Qindong looked like he was regretting something with his head lowered, but in reality, he had been watching this arrogant fellow from the corner of his eye. When he saw that he seemed to be thinking about something, he decided to add fuel to the fire. He immediately took the initiative to say, "Eunuch, you don't think that 100,000 taels of silver a month is impossible to achieve, right? Let me tell you, we've only seen the immortal abode. Relying on it won't work. However, once heavens beyond opens for business, the benefits will be unimaginable. This is because the things we sell are not even available in the Ming dynasty. Small items such as soap, toilet paper, diapers, toothbrushes, toothpaste, perfume, various kinds of canned fish, chong sam, and various kinds of women's underwear. Large items such as glass, various kinds of exquisite glass cups, and even the divine mirror in the palace can be bought as long as one is willing to spend money. Think about it. These items are only available to grandmasters. Wouldn't the price be decided by us? I'm afraid that 40% of the monthly profit would be more than 100,000 taels of silver." Wang Zhen had been listening attentively. Most of the things mentioned earlier were things that he had only heard of recently. Once they were circulated in the market, they would undoubtedly be popular goods. When he heard that there was even a godly item for sale, he was completely relieved. He was very optimistic about the future of sky beyond heaven. When Yang Qindong mentioned that 40% of the monthly profit would be more than 100,000 taels of silver, it was Wang Zhen's turn to slap the table and say, "Fine, then 200,000 taels of silver a month it is. This duke can guarantee that no taxes will be collected, and will also inject 2 million taels of silver into sky beyond heaven and the immortal abode. After a year, you will return the 2 million taels of silver to me, and at the same time, give me a monthly profit of 200,000 taels." Wang Zhen's tone was extremely resolute, as if he had made a decision. He was like a gambler. After he finished speaking, his eyes, which were slightly red from excitement, fell on Yang Qindong, as if waiting for his reply. "That's not a problem." Yang Qindong saw that the wolf had fallen into the trap. How could he hesitate in the slightest? Not only did he immediately agree, he even said that he could immediately sign a contract. If he couldn't, then the immortal abode and sky beyond heaven would all belong to Wang Zhen. Seeing Yang Qindong so confident, Wang Zhen was completely relieved. Whether it was the immortal abode or sky beyond heaven, they were both the sixth young master's painstaking efforts. If he dared to bet even that, then he was naturally trustworthy. Ha ha ha, Dong Shuai is indeed a straightforward person. Since that's the case, then you just need to sign the contract and wait for my 2 million taels of silver to enter your account. Wang Zhen was so happy that he even called out Dong Shuai's name. From Yang Shima to the sixth young master to the current Dong Shuai, it was clear that Wang Zhen's impression of Yang Qindong was changing step by step. His impression of him was growing with each passing day. Speaking of which, Wang Zhen was only blindly taking money. Even if something happened to the immortal abode, he would only receive a little less income. It wouldn't hurt him at all. But now, that was no longer the case. If he invested 2 million taels of silver, then he would have to pay a price. Whether it was the immortal abode or sky beyond heaven, they would all become part of his businesses. How could he afford to be careless or sloppy? As for Yang Qindong, Crimson City's development speed was unimaginable. After conquering Flag Mountain in the southwest of Ryukyu Island, there was nothing to worry about. It was only a matter of time before they could fully develop. Add to that the strength of the navy, and the amount of protection fees they collected every day could be described as 10,000 taels of silver a day. He really didn't lack this 2 million taels of silver, but he still forced Wang Zhen to spend so much money. He just wanted him to face this problem head-on, and put in more effort. Now that Wang Zhen was willing to fork out 2 million taels of silver, it proved that he had invested a lot. He definitely wouldn't allow anything to happen to his businesses. This was what Yang Chendong wanted to see. As for the 200,000 taels of silver a year from now? Haha, Wang Zhen would have to live until then for that to happen. The two of them really hit it off, and the matter was settled just like that. When they drank the tea, it seemed to have become much more fragrant. Seeing that Wang Zhen seemed to be in a good mood, Yang Chendong took the opportunity to raise two questions. The first was about who had caused this morning's incident. If they didn't find the mastermind behind it, there would likely be more of this kind of trouble in the future. They couldn't just passively take a beating, could they? The second question was about Yu Qian. He had proposed that the immortal abode pay taxes. Although this matter had been handed over to Wang Zhen, and there wasn't much of a problem, as long as he lived, he would have to keep an eye on them. Wouldn't that mean that they would have to guard against thieves for 1,000 days? Presumably, everyone would be in a lot of pain. Since he had reached an agreement with Yang Chendong, and had even given him a large sum of money, there were some things that Wang Zhen naturally wouldn't hide from him. He had his own thoughts on these two matters, and told the sixth young master about them. I've already investigated the matter. Sun Qing, Dong Kund, and the other censors impeaching you was Xianxia's doing behind the scenes. He was the one who leaked the news to the censors. These people have their responsibilities, so of course they would take action now that they have an excuse. Wang Zhen shook his head lightly as he spoke, a look of resentment on his face. Last time, Xianxia had slashed Yang Chendong with a blade. Originally, he should have been punished, and it wouldn't have been excessive even if he had been killed. However, it was precisely because of him that the sixth young master didn't pursue the matter. At that time, he had even promised that the two of them wouldn't interfere with each other's business in the future. But now, he had already made a move. Wasn't this the same as slapping him, the middleman, in the face? Yang Chendong's expression changed. He had already investigated the ins and outs of the matter last night, and now, he had thrown the question to Wang Zhen in order to hide it. Now he acted as if this was the first time he had heard of such a matter, and said angrily, "This Xianxia is really too much of a bully." Yang Chendong's anger was within Wang Zhen's expectations, so he wasn't surprised at all. Instead, he comforted him, "Dong Shuai, this matter isn't just a slap to your face, it is also a slap to this duke's face. Don't worry, I will give you an explanation for this matter. This guild will arrange and persuade Xianxia to leave the capital. What do you think?" "Leave the capital?" Yang Chendong pretended to be puzzled as he asked. "Yes, leave the capital. Xianxia's position is that of 1,000 households of the embroidered uniform guard, and he will use this as an excuse to monitor the officials outside the capital. As for when he will return, we'll decide based on his performance, all right?" Wang Zhen said with a smile, as if he was negotiating with Wang Zhen. Leaving the capital was naturally to toss out the problem and not cause trouble for the immortal abode and realm beyond heaven. As for when he would return, that would depend on Yang Chendong's performance. If he performed well and the two sides were satisfied with the cooperation, then he naturally wouldn't return to the capital. But if Yang Chendong wanted to play some tricks, then he would just summon him back, and Wang Zhen would just have to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. Wang Zhen thought that he had a shrewd plan, but he didn't know that this was exactly what Yang Chendong was thinking. Xianxia was a member of the embroidered uniform guard, and he also had a powerful eunuch brother like Xining. Making a move against him in the capital would naturally cause a great deal of trouble, and Yang Chendong would find it difficult to make a move against him. But things were different outside the capital. The heavens were high and the emperor was far away, so it was perfectly normal for something to happen to anyone. "All right, then let's do as eunuch says." Yang Chendong appeared to be in deep thought as he nodded his head in agreement. "And the second problem? How do you want to deal with Yu Qian? This person is a tough nut to crack. I won't hide it from you, Dong Shuai. This duke had wanted to deal with him before, but he was unmoved by force or persuasion. As an official, he is extremely honest. Moreover, there are many people who are willing to speak up for him. This has given this duke quite a headache. As he spoke, he rubbed his forehead. Wang Zhan truly didn't know what to do with Yu Qian. Yang Chendong had naturally heard about how Wang Zhan had captured Yu Qian and imprisoned him, only to be helplessly released later, from the Bureau of Security. He naturally knew that Wang Zhan wasn't trying to shirk responsibility, but that he truly had no other choice. Thus, he nodded, then pretended to have suddenly thought of something. Since Yu Qian can't do anything to him in the capital, why don't we just send him out of the capital like we did with Xishang? Isn't he the left assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel? Have someone investigate the situation of the various guard stations in the country. This way, what the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Chapter 108. Upon hearing Yang Chendong's idea, Wang Zhan's eyes lit up. Not bad, this is a good idea, but he'll still come back in the end. Wang Zhan lightly shook his head when he realized that this wasn't a permanent solution. It's fine. He'll leave one day at a time, and who knows what kind of situation he'll be in when he returns. When that time comes, we'll think of something else. After all, if we make a move against him now, it will implicate too many people and cause too much trouble, Yang Chendong said, appearing to fear Yu Qian very much. These words were precisely what Wang Zhan was worried about. He was also afraid of Yu Qian, or else he would have made a move long ago. Thinking that there was truly no better idea at the moment and that sending Yu Qian away would be a way to alleviate the situation, Wang Zhan nodded. Let's do as you say. The atmosphere of this second official meeting was much better than the first. When Wang Zhan decided to invest 2 million taels of silver, he had completely stepped onto Yang Chendong's boat. The only difference was that he was the one on the boat, and this was tantamount to placing his life in the other party's hands. It was just that he was completely unaware of it. In the end, Wang Zhan left the Yang clan manor in satisfaction. Not long after, Yu Qian and Xishang were transferred out of the capital. At the same time, the 2 million taels of silver were sent in batches to the newly opened Heavens Beyond Trading Company. There was already a dazzling array of goods here. There were many goods in Heavens Beyond, and they were constantly being shipped in from Crimson City. But when they were operating, they would always tell the merchants who came to purchase that there was a shortage of goods, so they had no choice but to sell in limited quantities. The purpose of this so-called limited quantity was to trick the eager consumers into buying, or else there would be no more. In other words, there wasn't enough supply, and there would be a mad scramble. In other words, there was a limit to how many goods could be sold each day. For example, glass. Each piece was 6 by 6, and only 1,000 pieces could be sold each day. The price was set by the highest bidder, and the items would be sold to the highest bidder. As for the others, they would have to wait until the next day. There were also glass cups, perfume, toilet paper, and other items. They were limited every day, so there were always a lot of people who needed them. There were very few goods, which made everything a hot commodity. And all of this followed the principle of bidding. The highest bidder wins. There were also divine items like mirrors, which were not only limited in quantity, but would only appear once every 3 days. Because of this, countless merchants fought over them, and there were also many people who tried to establish relations with the Yang family. Things like getting in through the back door happened from time to time. Since ancient times, sellers had always set the standard of being able to sell their goods. In fact, the more they sold, the better it would be. However, those who came to collect their goods would always sell them at a lower price. However, when they reached the Heavens Beyond Heaven, they did the exact opposite. Do you want the goods? Then, he would just offer a high price. Do you want more goods? Not only was there no discount on the price, but on the contrary, the price might be even higher. It was not impossible to monopolize the market, but one would need sufficient funds to do so. It must be said that when the Heavens Beyond Heaven played this game, many merchants hated it, but there was nothing they could do. Outside the Heavens Beyond Heaven, there were always the figures of the Eastern Faction Guards and the Brocade Guards. If someone dared to cause trouble, they would immediately be arrested. If they did not pay a large sum of hard-earned money, they would not be able to leave. The merchants did not dare to cause trouble, and could only play according to the rules of the heavens beyond heaven. As a result, a large amount of gold and silver flowed into the hands of Yang Chendong, and his funds became incomparably huge. Now, when he received goods from the Tianjin port, the receiver was also responsible for the task of delivering the money. It was really a pleasure. There were also some merchants who, seeing the heavens beyond heaven making so much money, gave birth to other thoughts. They wanted to get their own ships to travel the sea. Although there were some risks, if they succeeded and brought back the foreign goods, they would definitely make a fortune. However, how could they know that the great Ming dynasty's sea region had already been taken over by Yang Chendong? Those merchant ships that went out to buy goods were often intercepted by Gao Xiong's navy not long after they left the sea. Then they would be captured along with the money. That was truly a profitable business. Just from this, who knew how much Yang Chendong had earned? In truth, the order to seal off the sea region was given by Yang Chendong, but Gao Xiong himself was not the one who carried it out. Gao Xiong had long lost interest in dealing with the unarmed and defenseless Ming dynasty merchants, and handed these matters to his assistant Yu Guang. He was together with Lang Song, discussing the matter of attacking Deer Port. After taking down Qishan and dealing with the threat at the southwest rear of Qiqian City, the Yang family's new army took over Mount Ali and Mount Yu, taking over a large portion of Taichung. They also suppressed the enemy's forces near Taichung, and Deer Port became the first military stronghold facing the front lines. Deer Port. It was the biggest port in the entire Little Ryukyu country. The terrain here was great, and the coastline was also really smooth, allowing large numbers of ships to be parked there. Furthermore, its location was close to the Little Ryukyu Ocean region, making it difficult for others to suddenly attack. As such, it became a natural harbor base. As the highest-ranking officer of the new army, Gao Xiong had been drooling over this place and wanted to take it for himself. If not for the fact that they lacked manpower, he would have had such thoughts long ago. Now that Deng Maoqi and Fu Zhen had been killed, and the uprising army that was suppressed by the Ming army, Lang Song, who was unable to take advantage of the situation, could only bring his men back to Qiqian City. This allowed the military power in the city to be strengthened. Lang Song's gains from the Fu Zhen trip were huge. The 100 Lang vanguard and 500 support troops that he brought won many battles. In the end, no one died, and only 7 were injured. Moreover, their injuries were not serious. They did not have many casualties, and this was naturally due to the hard work and strictness of their training. After a few months of hard work, the results were also gratifying. They brought back more than 150,000 people from the Great Ming Dynasty, and they obtained countless resources such as gunpowder. With the addition of these Han Chinese, the problem of manpower was alleviated to a certain extent. After another serious and strict examination, He Yang, Song Deshang, and the other instructors did not dare to go easy on them. Every support soldier that wanted to officially become a member of the Lang Vanguard had to go through both physical and cultural tests. Only when their results were good or above could they become a regular soldier. However, because there were too many people waiting to be selected, the number of people who passed the examination this time was even more than the previous times combined. There were actually more than 600 people who passed the final examination. With so many new Lang Vanguard joining at once, Gao Xiong and Lang Song discussed and expanded the army, forming a total of 12 companies, with 100 people in each company. These people were then divided into 4 battalions, with 2 battalions for the Navy and the Army, making 6 companies. With the expansion of the Lang Vanguard, Gao Xiong and Lang Song's horizons were broadened, and they set their sights on Deer Harbor. They wanted to deal with the problem of Taichung in one go and deal a heavy blow to the No. 1 Shang dynasty. Now that they had a target, what came next was all sorts of investigations and infiltrations. According to the teachings of the 6th young master, before every battle, the most mature performance was to understand everything about the enemy. If there was enough time, it was best to know who the enemy's commander was. What kind of personality they had, what kind of fighting style they would use, had to be understood clearly. Only then could they achieve the greatest victory with the smallest price. Yang Chendong's words had always been treated as the truth in the new army. The investigations began, and the battle plan to attack Deer Harbor began to take shape. Shi Sheng left, and so did Yu Qian. In the capital, Yang Chendong seemed to have calmed down a lot after the departure of the two. All he could see were the guests of the immortal abode and the merchants of the realm beyond heaven. For the time being, Yang Chendong didn't pay too much attention to these things that he had been preparing for a long time. He knew that as long as everything went according to plan, he would definitely earn enough money and gain enough popularity. Since he didn't need to spend too much effort on these things, what came next was to deal with those people who had caused trouble for him. In the study of the sixth young master of the Yang clan manor, there were 3 pieces of paper. These were 3 sets of information sent over by the Bureau of Security. They were information on the left Assistant Minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel Yu Qian, 1000 Commander Shi Shang of the Embroidered Uniform Guard, and Imperial Censor Shen Yu of the Sichuan Dao. What Yang Chendong didn't expect was that not only did Wang Zhen chase Yu Qian and Shi Sheng out of the capital, he even chased Shen Yu of the Sichuan Dao, who had returned to the capital to report on his work. These 2 are talents. If you want to keep them, send them to Crimson City. Tell Gao Xiong and Lang Song to arrange for people to keep an eye on them 24 hours a day. They can go and see everything, but they can't leave or do anything. After handing over the information on Yu Qian and Shen Yu to Tiger's Mane, Yang Chendong's expression hardened. He looked at the information on Shi Shang on the last piece of paper and said, "As for this person, take care of him on the spot. But do it cleanly, and no one can see any problems. Can you do it?" "Yes," Tiger's Mane excitedly replied. Then he leaned forward and asked, "Young master, can I personally take care of this matter?" "No." Yang Chendong decisively shook his head. "You are this young master's subordinate. Everyone knows that. If you disappear at this time, people will inevitably become suspicious. How about this? Let Dao Zhao's group take care of this matter. Don't they complain every day that they have nothing to do? If this matter fails, then they can just return to Crimson City and become a supporting soldier. If they want to join the Cold Front, they will have to face even more difficult and stringent tests." Seeing how straightforward Yang Chendong was, Tiger's Mane knew that there was no chance for him to take advantage of this matter. He immediately stood at attention and replied, "Young master, please rest assured. This matter will be handled beautifully." Chapter 109. Nanjing's Yangzhou Prefecture. As the capital of the Ming dynasty and now a subsidiary capital, this place was still bustling with activity. Moreover, the climate was pleasant. So much of the Ming dynasty's wealth had been gathered here. Yangzhou Prefecture was the most prosperous of all places. Not only were there all sorts of goods, but because the heavens were high and the emperor was far away, the entertainment industry was also very developed. Shi Shang and his 10 son brothers were enjoying themselves here. He had originally wanted to annoy Yang Chendong a little, so he had his brothers send a message to the Imperial censors. This had led to the impeachment of Yang Chendong in the Imperial court, which had led to the emperor imposing taxes on the immortal abode, allowing him to vent some of his anger. But soon after, he suffered the consequences of his own actions. Because he had acted on his own initiative, he had incurred the wrath of Wang Zhen. He had left the capital this time to avoid the storm. In his big brother's words, he should leave the capital and have some fun. Once he was tired and the capital was calm, he would naturally be called back. Knowing that this was the result of his big brother's compromise with Wang Zhen, Shi Sheng obediently left the capital and came to Yangzhou, a place of pleasant weather and romance. As soon as he entered this place, Shi Sheng had the feeling of a dragon entering the sea. He brought a dozen brothers to eat and drink every day, which was very comfortable. At night, he would find a very famous local flower to sleep. It was really like being a groom every day, living like an immortal. But all of this would come to an end tonight, because Dao Xiao had personally come, and with him were 3 of Lungfeng's brothers. All of them were extremely skilled in firearms. Dao Xiao had taken on 3 missions this time. Kill Shi Shang, capture Yu Qian, and capture Shen Yu. He had assigned 3 of his brothers to each of the last 2 missions. Yu Qian was just a scholar without the strength to truss a chicken, so sending 3 of his brothers was already giving them face. As for Shi Shang's mission, he had to do it himself. Although Shi Shang had injured the 6th young master, which had been part of the plan, the guards had still been dissatisfied. Based on what they had said, if anyone offended the 6th young master, they should just kill them. What was the point of trying to injure themselves to gain the enemy's confidence? However, this was an order personally given by the 6th young master. As soldiers, it was their duty to obey orders, so there was nothing they could say. Now that he had the opportunity, how could he let Shi Shang go so easily? After entering Yangzhou, he quickly met up with the person in charge of the security bureau. After finding out where Xianxia was going tonight and which entertainer he had taken a fancy to, Dao Xiao quickly started making plans. In Dao Xiao's words, since this brat likes women so much, then let him die on a woman's belly. With a general direction in mind, the next step was to make various preparations, as well as various disguises and infiltrations. He had experienced this many times in the past when he entered the Cold Peak trial, so naturally, he was extremely familiar with it. Very quickly, one of his subordinates took on the role of a pimp, another was in charge of keeping watch, and another was in charge of receiving and retreating. Naturally, the matter of attacking Xianxia was left to Dao Xiao. He was playing with a bottle of medicine in his hand. These were all aphrodisiacs. After taking them, even if he was facing a sow, he would not be able to control himself. He wanted to see Xianxia's wonderful performance tonight. The sky was dark. As expected, Xianxia led a group of subordinates into the ambush that Dao Xiao had prepared beforehand. Once he entered, he could not wait to find the room of the star of the place, the lady called Xianxia, and walked in. However, the moment he entered the room, a pimp followed behind him. At this moment, Xianxia was anxiously taking off his clothes and was about to get on the bed to wait for the lady's arrival. Suddenly, he heard movement behind him, and the footsteps did not belong to a lady. Out of habit, he drew his spring-embroidered saber. "Dear customer, don't be nervous. I'm here to give you medicine. After taking these things, I guarantee that you will be more energetic. A night as a bridegroom only costs 1 tael of silver. It's cheap, right?" The pimp did not show any fear when facing Xianxia, who was holding a saber. Instead, he walked forward to promote the things in his hands. Originally, when he saw that it was a pimp who came in, Xianxia thought that he was too nervous. Especially when he heard that the other party was promoting pills, he did not take the other party seriously. Instead, he waved his hand and said, "Get out of here. This young master's body is very good. I don't need those things." The pimp should have left after he finished speaking. However, he did not expect that the other party would take another step forward. At the same time he kept saying, "Dear customer, my medicine is really good. If you don't try it, you'll regret it. Get out." Seeing that the pimp was actually getting closer to him, Xianxia was a little angry. The other party had disturbed his elegance. Even if he killed the other party here, it would not be a big deal. It would just be a lowly record. After he killed the other party, he would just have to report it to the local authorities. The spring-embroidered saber was raised high, as if it would fall at any time. However, the pimp standing opposite him was not afraid at all. Instead, he opened his mouth and said, "Dear customer, you are being unreasonable. I brought you something out of kindness. If you don't want it, just don't want it. Why do you have to fight?" The pimp's calmness gave Xianxia a bad feeling. However, he could not figure out what was wrong. While he was hesitating, he suddenly felt a strong wind coming from behind. Instinctively, he wanted to turn around. However, because his attention was on the pimp, he needed time to turn around. Just as he turned around, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his neck. Then he fainted on the ground. Dao Xiao appeared behind Xianxia. Looking at the unconscious man, he shook his head and said, "Such a lack of vigilance. I don't know how you became a Jianghu of the embroidered uniform guard." After saying this, Dao Xiao angrily said to the man who acted as the pimp, "Qinggang, how did you act? You did not show the slightest bit of fear. You almost alerted him. Do you know that if he shouted outside, our plan would have failed?" "Yes, Captain. Please calm down. I was also angry when I saw Xianxia. How could I have thought of pretending to be afraid?" The subordinate called Qinggang hurriedly admitted his mistake. He was afraid that Dao Xiao would continue to scold him on this issue, so he said, "Captain, let's hurry up. That Xianxia has gone to take a bath. I'm afraid she will be back soon." "Oh right." Only then did Dao Xiao remember that this place was not safe. It was also not the time to make a conclusion. He nodded and let Qinggang help the unconscious Xianxia up. Then, Dao Xiao poured all the pills in the bottle into Xianxia's mouth. After Xianxia drank some water, he completely digested the pills. Then, he carried Xianxia back to the bed. One of them left through the window while the other left through the door. After a short while, Xianxia, who had just finished her bath, entered the room. When she saw that Xianxia was already on the bed, she couldn't help but reveal a coquettish look on her face. Then she swayed her hips and walked to the bed. She had just taken off her clothes when Xianxia woke up. The first thing he saw was Xianxia, who looked like a little white rabbit. His eyes turned red and he pounced on her. Then, there was a loud shaking sound from the wooden bed. Xianxia was dead. The next morning, when the subordinates saw that the Jianghu had not come out of the room, they knocked on the door and entered. The first thing they saw was Xianxia lying dead on the bed with his eyes wide open. Xianxia had also died with him. She had been tortured to death. His subordinate hurriedly did a checkup and concluded that she had died of natural causes due to consuming too much aphrodisiac. Immediately, the news was sent to the Xining eunuch in the capital with the express speed of 600 li. At the same time that Xianxia died, the left assistant minister of the Bureau of Military Personnel and Imperial censor Shenyu appeared on a ship. That ship was sailing through the sea, and its destination was Crimson City. Isn't this Imperial censorship? Why are you here? Looking at the boundless ocean around him, then looking at his former colleague, Yu Qian's eyes widened, his face filled with curiosity and confusion. I don't know. This lowly official only took a nap. When I opened my eyes, I was already here. Shenyu shook his head, a confused look on his face. It seems like we've been kidnapped. Yu Qian was smart and immediately understood his situation. At this moment, he saw a man dressed in camouflage clothes standing not far away. He shouted, "Hey, who are you? Why did you kidnap this official and imperial censorship? Do you know that we're very poor? We don't have any money, and no one will come to ransom us." Yu Qian truly didn't have any money. This point made him feel much more at ease. He really wanted to say that they had captured the wrong people and that they were useless. However, no matter how much Yu Qian shouted, the only response he got was the crashing and slapping of the waves. The soldier not far away seemed to have not heard his shouts and continued to stand there. He would occasionally glance in their direction, preventing them from jumping into the sea. Yu Qian and Shenyu naturally wouldn't seek death. They wouldn't die before they figured out what was going on. But they also sadly discovered that they didn't know where they were. Where was the ship heading? What would the future hold? They only knew that they had left the Great Ming Dynasty and their future was uncertain. The immortal abode and sky beyond heaven were still very popular. Every day, people would line up to eat and stock up. This was especially true for the immortal abode. It was already the 12th month, and the weather was getting colder and colder. More and more people began to wear cotton robes on the streets. However, no matter how cold it was outside, the immortal abode was still as warm as spring all year round. Some of the private rooms even had to open their windows to let in some warm air. All of this was naturally because of the stove. Chapter 110. Yang Chendong had already considered the problem of the capital's climate. When the immortal abode was first built, he had hired craftsmen to install a large number of furnaces in the mezzanine. Once the weather turned cold and the coals were ignited, the heat would naturally dissipate. The guests quickly noticed that the immortal abode was as warm as spring. After asking around, they learned that it was because of the furnaces. Speaking of which, this sort of invisible heating method was far superior to placing a brazier in one's home. Many people immediately asked if they could pay the craftsmen of the immortal abode to install the furnaces in their homes. This was a business that Yang Chendong had originally planned to make money, so the staff very politely agreed. But because there were only a limited number of craftsmen and limited materials, not only was the installation extremely expensive, they also had to wait in line. But for the sake of keeping their homes as warm as spring, many people paid up and waited in line. This matter quickly spread, and the Minister of Works, Sherpu, paid a visit to the Yang clan manor. The potatoes had been harvested long ago, and the seeds had been distributed. The embroidered uniform guard and Eastern Depot soldiers could no longer be seen outside the Yang clan manor. But even so, no one dared to cause trouble here. This was because all signs indicated that Yang Shima had an extremely good relationship with eunuch Wang Zhen. The two would meet from time to time and converse for several hours at a time. With Wang Zhen as the flag, who would be stupid enough to take the initiative to find trouble with Yang Chendong? Although Sherpu was the Minister of Works, a second-rank official in the Imperial court, he was still nothing in front of Wang Zhen. Not only did he not want to offend Wang Zhen, But Minister Shi even got his current position because of Wang Zhan's relationship. Naturally, he had to be extremely polite to Yang Qindong. He couldn't just send an order like he would any other official, so he decided to personally come. Yang Qindong attached great importance to Shi Pu's visit. His father, Yang Rong, had once been the Minister of Works, so their relationship was quite close. When Shi Pu arrived and entered the main hall of the Yang clan manor, he was greeted by a wave of hot air, but he couldn't see a single brazier burning. He immediately knew that this place had to have been installed with furnaces. He couldn't help but say with envy, "Honorable nephew, your place really is like a paradise of immortals." Ha! Yang Qindong clasped his fist in the direction of the capital, a solemn expression on his face. "Uncle Shi praises me too much. This is all thanks to His Majesty's governance, allowing the realm to be at peace and the common people to live and work in peace." "That's right. His Majesty is quite diligent." Shi Pu laughed. The current Ming dynasty looked strong and prosperous, but that was just the capital left behind by Ren Xuanji. When it came to Zhu Qizhen, he put eunuchs in important positions. These court officials, these representatives of Confucianism, were no longer as strong as they used to be. However, Shi Pu wouldn't tell Yang Qindong these things in depth. After all, he was just a junior and didn't deserve any deeper guidance. Listening to Shi Pu's nonchalant words, Yang Qindong chuckled without saying a word. "Uncle Shi, you didn't come here today just to chat with me, right?" "Haha, of course not. Let's not beat around the bush. This time, I'm here for the furnace wall. You see, such a good thing should be shared with everyone." Shi Pu chuckled as if he was working for the country. When it came to serious matters, Yang Qindong's expression became awkward. "What's wrong? Does honorable nephew have some difficulty?" Seeing Yang Qindong's hesitant appearance, Shi Pu felt that this matter wasn't as simple as he had imagined. "Yes." Yang Qindong finally nodded his head and explained, "I won't hide it from Uncle Shi. When I first made this furnace wall, it was just an idea. Later on, I invested a great deal of manpower and resources to understand the principles. For this matter, Eunuch Wang also invested a great deal of money. Now that he has a share of the furnace wall, if I were to give it away for no good reason, I'm afraid that even if I agree, there will be others who won't." By raising Wang Zhen's name, Shi Pu was using his influence to suppress others. Looking at Shi Pu's appearance, it was clear that he wanted Yang Qindong to contribute the method of constructing the furnace wall for free. This was something that Yang Qindong couldn't accept. In the society of that time, there was no such thing as property rights. This was especially true for craftsmen. No matter how hard they worked or how much they invested, once they made something good, it would be promoted for free. As for the creator, he wouldn't receive any benefits. At most, the higher-ups would praise him verbally, but in terms of material benefits, there was nothing. This was because from everyone's point of view, the things you made should be contributed. Since it was contributed, why should there be any benefits? Under the heavens, all good things should belong to the emperor, and not a method for personal gain. This seemed to allow more people to benefit, but in reality, it was extremely unfair to the creator. He spent money, time, and talent to make something that was easily used by others. His investment and output weren't proportional at all. In the long run, who would waste time to create something? Even if they didn't create something, they would still receive money. This kind of unfair treatment caused everyone to gradually lose their creativity. Now, Shi Pu was asking for this craftsmanship as if he was an ordinary craftsman. Since he was born and lived in the Great Ming Dynasty, then the things he made should also belong to the Great Ming Dynasty. Therefore, he should give it all to her. He was against this kind of working method in his heart, but he couldn't say it out loud. Why was everyone else like this? But only she was special. Therefore, Yang Qindong could only use Wang Zhen's name to suppress others. A while ago, the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War, Yu Qian, and the Sichuan Imperial censor, Shan Yu, suddenly disappeared without a trace. No one knew if they were alive, and no one knew if they were dead. When this matter came out, everyone's suspicions were pointed at Wang Zhen. This was because these two people had all kinds of conflicts with Eunuch Wang. Now that they both disappeared, was there anyone else other than Wang Zhen who had this kind of ability? However, there was no evidence, so no one could do anything to Wang Zhen. They could only secretly guard against him. Now that the name was taken out, Even Sherpu's expression turned ugly after hearing it. Before he came, he thought that Yang Qindong might not be willing to hand over the craftsmanship, but it didn't matter. He only needed to move him with emotion and reason. After all, he was still a fifth-rank official in the Imperial court, so he should have this kind of awareness, right? However, when Wang Zhen's name came out, Sherpu instantly lost his temper. Then, other than buying, is there no other way? Sherpu knew that forcing Wang Zhen to hand over the craftsmanship wouldn't work, so he tried to ask. This, logically speaking, is not possible. Yang Qindong shook his head. However, when Sherpu's face turned gloomy, he continued. However, since Uncle Sher has personally come, I still have to give you face. How about this? Your Ministry of Works can provide copper in exchange for me sending someone to make the fireplace. How about it? Nowadays, most of the fireplaces in the market were made of copper and iron, and some of the parts were very delicate. For example, things like the screws were far from what the Ministry of Works could make. If he were to copy them, it was very likely that the quality of the product wouldn't be up to standard, resulting in all sorts of problems. Once a fire broke out, it would be a huge problem. It was precisely because of the uniqueness of this technology that the cost of installation was extremely high, to the point that ordinary officials couldn't accept it. As a result, many officials went to find Sherpu and said that since he was in charge of the Ministry of Works, this matter was within his jurisdiction. How to install the fireplace in everyone's homes should be his responsibility. In the end, these officials just didn't want to spend so much money to enjoy the benefits of the fireplace. Now, Yang Qindong gave a compromise. The technology couldn't be taught, but it could be exchanged with copper. This way, with the large amount of copper in the Ministry of Works warehouse, the problem of installing the fireplace could be solved. It could also be considered as solving Sherpu's urgent problem. Okay, then I'll thank nephew. Knowing that Yang Qindong was giving him face, Sherpu immediately said it as if he was afraid that the other party would go back on his word. Afterwards, the two of them discussed the amount of copper needed to exchange for a fireplace. During this time, Yang Qindong naturally demanded an exorbitant price. Although Sherpu felt that it was a bit high, he thought about how those things were temporarily useless in the warehouse, so he might as well exchange them for benefits first. If there was a shortage, he could just collect them from all over the country. Thus he agreed. In the end, Sherpu left Xianxia Manor with a satisfied expression. After he left, when Xiao Yin came to clean up the tea, she asked Yang Qindong with curiosity and confusion, "Young master? Since he brought out Wang Zhen's name, why did he agree to exchange copper? This way, won't we earn a lot less money?" Haha, our Yin also knows how to use her brain to think about problems. Yang Qindong said with a big smile. Young master? Yin has always used her brain. It's just that I'm not as smart as you, so I can't see it. Xiao Yin said somewhat coquettishly. Ever since the relationship between the two of them became real, in front of Yang Qindong, she became more and more like a little girl. Right, young master, you still haven't said why. Why? Yang Qindong looked into the distance and was silent for a while before replying. Even Yin said that I used Wang Zhen's name to scare people. I'm sure the others would think the same, right? This wasn't what the young master wanted to see. This time, he would let the Ministry of Works arrange the exchange of copper for furnace walls. Firstly, it would serve more people, and secondly, it would be a way to express goodwill to them, so that they wouldn't hate the young master like they hated Wang Zhen. Of course, the most important point is that Qiqian City lacks copper. The industry there is developing too quickly, especially the military factories and shipyards. As more and more advanced products are put into production, the shortage will only increase. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.